I've never seen the level of self-destruction in a political campaign. You have Democrats who are reinforcing the biggest negative against their candidate. Republicans fully have accepted a convicted felon who lied in the debate, and they're sitting here saying, y'all go right ahead. What do you make of the insanity of the Democratic Party?
Unfortunately, Roland, I share your incredulity about the whole situation. But for me, this has very little to do with Joseph Biden and much more to do with the very reality that Vice President Kamala Harris might be close to inheriting or sitting in the seat of president than a lot of people wished. And what we're seeing is not the base of the party coming out and demanding that Biden step down, the voters who actually participated in the primary. We're not seeing the poor come out and that Biden step down. You're not seeing Black Americans, either men or women, demand that he step down. Latinos expanded their reach and an appreciation and commitment to voting for Biden. So I think at this point, we can look at who is making these demands. These tend to be very wealthy white men who are from very particular political camps, who have a lot to gain if there is a Trump presidency and all the chaos that will bring with it. So I'm just hoping. I saw Chris Matthews today did an interview, and he was talking about the fact that Joe Biden is kind of built for people to underestimate him. He's not necessarily part of the elite as we tend to think of. I mean, he's more elite as compared to my community, for sure. But for him, being a part of the working class and sort of making that a part of his identity, he sits in that space. But then he's also, in some ways, a bit of an outsider. He was not the natural successor after he served faithfully as Barack Obama's vice president, something that most white men, I think many of us were shocked to see an older white man exhibit that level of deference and commitment to fulfilling that Black man's vision, which was a beautiful thing. And then he was passed over for Hillary Clinton. And what we're seeing is a lot of folks from the Clinton camp. We're seeing a lot of folks who are making a lot of demands in the face of absolute facts. Like, how about the fact that the Republicans and the Heritage Foundation have all, since June, they've been saying since 2 days after the debate, if the Democrats tried to remove Biden off the ticket, got the lawsuits already. And whoever this mythical person would be who would replace Joe Biden, what's their ground game? Who are they? And how on earth are you going to be able to galvanize people around that person? Because I'm assuming if they're going to make this a thing, I do not see them pointing to Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris. And again, I think a lot of this has much more to do with the fact that a Black woman is this much closer to the presidency. And by this much closer, I mean in the debate, Joe Biden's humanity was on display. The morality of that man was on display. And yet his ability to be one of the most successful presidents as it pertains to legislation. And quite frankly, Joe Biden was not my candidate. He was not somebody that I was going for in 2020. I ultimately did because I needed to not have Trump in office. But he's been a damn good president by like many objective measures. And so the only people who benefit from this are the Democratic elite who aren't even, they don't have a plan beyond let's replace him and get someone on the ticket because we don't think he can win. Well, you had your chance. That's what the whole primary process was for. He got over 80% of the vote in the primary. Some people did run against. Heard folks say, well, those weren't serious candidates. Well, let's, put our grown-up pants on. This is what it is. People made decisions about whether or not they were going to run or not. This is the candidate that the voters are galvanized around. And at this point, I don't have people calling into my show at Sirius saying they want Joe Biden to step down. I have people calling into my show at Sirius saying, what the hell is going on? And why are they ruining this for everybody?
Let me do this here. There's an issue with your microphone, Lori. So let's see if we can get that handled, because it sounded like it was a wind tunnel. So if y'all can handle that for me. Let me bring in my panel right now. Lauren Victoria Burke, Black Press USA, out of Arlington, Virginia. We have, of course, Dr. Greg Carr, Department of Afro-American Studies at Howard University. Also, Christopher Boozy, CEO of Spoutable out of New Jersey. Let me go to Christopher. Christopher, you've been tweeting about this, and you keep saying the numbers don't lie. You keep saying that Biden can win. Explain that.
Hey, Martin. And I share Lori's frustration in this because it's insanity. Yes, not only he can win, I think he can win and do better than he did in 2020. The numbers, look, everyone is basing all of this chaos over polls that are garbage. I'm just going to say it like it is. They're garbage polls. The methodology behind these polls are garbage. They're not accurate, and the media is still touting the polls because it drives a narrative. Okay, so let's break it down. First off, Biden, in terms of on the ground, is doing extremely well. I talk to reporters who are covering the campaigns. I talk to people who are I talk to people who are actually interacting with voters, and they all say, the voters are energized. They can't wait to vote for Biden. The debate was not really an issue. Yes, people were a little concerned in terms of, him talking slowly, what was going on, but they were not saying, hey, he should step aside. They were not saying, hey, he should be replaced or anything like that. Now, these are voters on the ground. So the first thing for me when I look at if a candidate going down is, one, what kind of support are they getting in terms of their donors? When I mean donors, I'm talking about small grassroots donors. Two, when I'm looking at numbers, and I'm not talking about polls because I don't look at polls, I'm looking at social media. What are people saying on social media? Are people saying, once again, she should step aside, or, hey, I'm supporting him, I'm behind him? You got to parse through the bots, the trolls, the fake accounts, things like that, and get down to the actual people. And once again, the majority of folks are like, what is going on with the Democratic Party? We're supporting him. We don't want to see him replaced. So then the other thing is historical data. Replacing a candidate, for example, before we get into even how I know Biden can win, historical data, like with LBJ stepping aside, that was a disaster, an absolute disaster when Democrats did that. And I have been tweeting, if Democrats do that again, whether they replace them with someone totally different or if they replace them with VP Harris, they will get slaughtered in November. And the reason being is because first you're giving up the incumbency, you give up the bully pulpit. That's the first thing. Secondly, you're going to end up going into a convention where it's going to cause a lot of chaos. Remember, there were millions of people who voted during the primaries. They want Biden. They like Biden. There are a lot of people who also like VP Harris and who would love for VP Harris to be the nominee. The problem, though, with that is it's a little too cute and it's a little too late. If you replace Biden and put VP Harris in, there are going to be people who are going to feel like their vote didn't matter, that it is the quote-unquote elites picking whoever. So that's going to cause chaos going into the convention and out of convention. And if there's chaos, they're not going to win. You have to have unity. And then the other thing is, as your previous guest stated, if they replace VP Harris and put someone totally new in there, that's it. I mean, that's game over. You're talking about losses up and down the ballot because, once again, who's this person? Are they going to be able to galvanize folks in 4-ish months? Are they going to be able to get the base? I've heard people float Gavin Newsom, Whitmore. Gretchen Whitmore. It's not going to work. So in terms of November, before all of this happened, I have been keeping track of this stuff. And I've been saying for a long time, not only do I believe Biden can flip Florida, which people think I'm crazy with saying that, but also North Carolina. The reason is this is going to be the first election where abortion is on a ballot. 11 states have some sort of, abortion-related measure on the ballot. As we have seen before, Democrats have done extremely well time abortions on the ballot. Then you have the conviction. You have the 2 impeachments, you have the indictments, and on that you have, once again, the Supreme Court ruling immunity and the Roe v. Wade. If all of that is on the table, I do not see a path for Donald Trump. There is no path. But when you listen to the pundits, you listen to these analysts, you would think it was the complete and total opposite of that. It's just not true. Lastly, every cycle since 2016, Democrats have continuously overperformed. They overperformed in 2018. They overperformed in 2020. As we know, in 2022, when they talked about the red wave, they said, the red wave, Democrats are going to get clobbered. Not only did Democrats gain a seat in the Senate, they barely lost the House, where it was predicted that they were going to lose 20 to 30 seats. And then across the country, they also did well in state, local races, government, shit like that. So this is going to be the very first election, presidential election, where we have abortion on the ballot. And I do believe that is galvanizing people, especially obviously women, like we've never seen before. So once again, I agree with the previous, and I share the same frustration that Democrats are actually hurting themselves by all of this. Yeah. Public, it's not.
So, Lauren Victoria Berg, here's a perfect example. So, a poll came out today regarding Latino voters. Go to my iPad, Henry. Matt Barreto, one of the top pollsters. It's 53-36, Biden over Trump. But this is what he said. He said that Biden can increase his advantage from plus 70 to plus 30 among Latinos if he do several things. Here's the thing that I keep saying, Lauren. It's July 11th. The election is not July 12th. So when I'm watching these folks who are saying, oh my God, there's no path to victory, you literally have 117 days to actually change the game. So I don't understand the logic of the donors and these analysts and podcasters and Axelrod and others when the Washington Post poll today shows it's tied. What the hell?
It shows that it's tied. I think that what you're seeing is sort of a lack and a reluctance of certain quadrants within the Democratic Party to finally get off the stage. I think the Clinton crew is still sort of in there wanting to be something. 100 days is really not a long period of time, I think, in a political campaign. They have 39 days to the convention. And this is problematic to have prominent people in a political party effectively destroying their presumptive nominee for the presidency of the United States in public, by the way. Every night on CNN, and it's for some cases for some members of Congress showing up again and again and again on cable TV to say negative things about the presumptive nominee of your party. If you think that communication strategy, no matter how anybody might feel about anything, I can assure you that if they keep doing that, they're going to lose, not because of what happened on June 27, but in the last 14 days, but because of what happened in the last 14 days. I actually think most people out there, and in calling people and talking to members of Congress about their constituents, most people out there do not have the same ways that people do in the Beltway, or people who are standing in the White House briefing room or in the U.S. Capitol. There's a disconnect there. And when President Biden at the beginning of this week talked about elites, I think he hit the nail on the head, because there's a group in there who thinks differently from what. There's a group of elite people, frankly, who are in the media who think that everybody thinks like them. And as somebody from New York, I get it. The New York Times seems to think that the thing they say is important, but most normal people are not thinking that way. It's just simple as that. There is some, in Virginia, we have a guy named Larry Sabato who did reflect in the first few days that he thought that there was going to be some distance between Biden and Trump in the polling numbers that he saw fairly quickly. But it does take a few weeks to figure out whether or not something like June 27 really has some resonance. And I don't know that we have the answer to that, but I'll tell you what, it's hard. I think it's hard for me to believe that a Republican Party who can't get the popular vote in over 24 years is suddenly going to get the popular vote now and this year, running a lunatic and a pathological liar as their lead candidate versus somebody who is trusted but is going through a trial and tribulation right now. It is problematic. I think the Democratic Party is making a tragic mistake. And I think there's a lack of leadership there. I think if Speaker Pelosi was there, quite frankly, she would have told the caucus to shut up by now. They are doing damage to themselves. And you have to remember, just lastly, the only members of Congress care about is their own election. That's it. Once they sense that their election will be jeopardized by the person at the top of the ticket for whatever reason, they will bail, and that's what you're seeing. And of course, the vice president is not the vice president. It's going to be interesting to see how they navigate this if they push Biden out of there, which I frankly doubt it. I think he's dug in. But if they were to do that, if it's not Vice President Harris, they're going to see some, if they're seeing rancor now, they better get ready.
Greg Carr, here's the thing that people need to understand. This is not about, oh my God, Dems love Joe Biden. If you look at the numbers, they thought he was old in 2020.
Right.
But what happened when they went and voted? And so what I'm looking at is, after all of this rancor, it's still 46-46. Trump has a ceiling. So what it means, Democrats, get off your asses, drive your base to the polls to win. But you don't sit here on July 11th and it's like, oh my God, I don't know what's going on. I mean, this poll came out. It is hysteria driven by one side, and they've spent 2 weeks attacking their own and not spending the same amount of time going after Donald Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes no sense unless you don't care. I echo everything that has been said so far. What Larry said about Vice President Harris, Christopher, what you said, Brother Boozy, as it relates to these polls flying in the face of conventional logic, and of course, Lauren, exactly what you said. This is about naked self-interest. This morning, Dominic, Mastrangello, reporting in The Hill, puts this on Obama, and I'm with him 100% because George Clooney called Obama before he put that op-ed in the New York Times. They were at that fundraiser they had a couple of weeks ago. And according to the reporting, Obama didn't tell him not to do it, didn't tell him to do it, which sent the signal. Most of these people, like that swamp creature out of Louisiana, James Carville, they are former either Clinton operatives or Obama operatives. Not looking for a smoking gun, and there's other things that will be revealed. Maybe they know something about the president's health that we don't. We'll see in a minute, maybe or maybe not. But what we're seeing is Pelosi, for example, telling people in swing districts, do what you got to do to survive, but wait until after NATO wrapped up today. What we're seeing clearly is that there is an orchestration. Obama and it's forced Joe Biden to sound a little bit like Bernie Sanders. He's waging war against the elite. Ironically, Sanders is all in for Biden, as are the voters. So I'll just end with this. The New York Times, whether they got an axe to grind, whether the Sulzbergers or whoever has got the axe to grind with Biden because he wouldn't give them interviews or whatever, when you're looking at fools like Brett Stevens on their op-ed page, you expect it from Brett Stevens or Ross Dohat, maybe even from a guy like Nicholas Kristof. But here comes all of a sudden Paul Krugman. Here comes these other, today's op-ed pages is another bloodbath. Nobody reading the New York Times and the Washington Post but us. Ignore these fools, and whatever will be. The governor of Michigan saying, well, maybe you should take a cognitive test. We know you want to be the president, Big Gretch. We know you mad still because he didn't pick you and pick Kamala Harris because he needed to win, like Clyburn and them told him. And then there looms the governor of California, because the bottom line is this. If Biden is reelected and steps down before, then Kamala Harris has the power of the incumbency. And you know who looms after Kamala Harris? The governor of Maryland, Wes Moore. Y'all are soft white nationalists, and you're willing to risk all the rest of us because of your political ambition.
Lori, here's the thing that jumps out at me, Lori. And again, you have Democrats who are sitting here going, let's watch every move for mistake. Well, the last couple days, no mistake, so no coverage. You had Brian Stelter go on CNN and say, well, he's been almost invisible since the debate. 18 appearances in 9 days. And I tweeted him, I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? That's not invisible. So what you're seeing is you are seeing a cabal to saying, the hell with the voters, we're going to decide. And I made it clear, if they think they can skip Vice President Harris, they are going to launch a civil war in the party that is going to destroy them for decades.
Roland, they can try it if they want to. I guarantee they will live to regret it. But unfortunately, so will the rest of us. The Trump campaign is effective. The Republican Party is effectively broke. They are being bled by all of the legal battles, and they don't have a great ground game in a number of swing states. This is a winnable contest. And in addition to all of that, everything that Chris Boozy and all the other guests said is I absolutely concur. But we also have Project 2025 right there, like right there. And if we were talking about that and educating people about that, about the threats to our democracy, and comparing that to the advances that we have won. And I know that a lot of us in our community, we want to see the president issue the legislation that's got black in it. We want the black housing program. We want the black affirmative action program, the black healthcare plan. Listen, we live in America as it is, not in the America as we would want it to be. As soon as that were to happen, we know that the white folks who are very upset about black advancement would file a lawsuit and that legislation would be canceled. So we have to be more sophisticated as the electorate. What are the programs and the policies and the positions that have been very advantageous to black people? I had somebody call and say, well, what has Biden done for black people? You can literally Google what has Biden done for black people, and the fact sheet is immense. None of it says the black plan, but it is extraordinarily important that we become way more facile in thinking about what skin we have in the game. I also just think that it's important that even as we look at Vice President Kamala Harris, who I believe will be a phenomenal president, we are in one of the most anti-black, anti-woman social moments that we have been, certainly in my lifetime. And I know I'm not the oldest one on this panel, but the reality is for decades, we've been seeing this increase and a surge in the most recent years in anti-blackness and anti-woman sentiment. And the idea that Vice President Kamala Harris would be able to just sort of waltz into that position and take it and run, I think is ludicrous. And I think it undermines her ability to be the very effective president that I think she's ultimately going to be. But if we were talking more about Project 2025, then we could also talk about Agenda 180, which is Project 2025's day-by-day plan for 180 days as to how that plan is going to get implemented. All of this energy focusing on a president who has been, by most accounts, one of the most successful presidents in our nation's history as it pertains to leveling the playing field, and certainly not perfect. I mean, it's Joe Biden. Come on, we ain't got to love Joe Biden to recognize that it's far better to have been under this presidency than it would have been under his opponent. But to think that we have the most successful president that we don't had in generations, particularly for black people and black interests, and white money to leak and just come in and say we don't like him because he's too old. We knew he was old. He been old. We was telling y'all that when Obama picked him. So this is not new. White supremacy is just reinventing itself. And I love the soft white nationalism, because what we need to be very clear about is we don't do permanent friends. We don't do permanent enemies. We got permanent issues. And my issue is black people. And I need black people to not come out of this in a situation where there is chaos, because I don't have an underground railroad, Brother Roland. And I don't know if you do or if anybody else do. I didn't get the memo about who's building the underground railroad for our community if this goes very, very right. And by that, I mean if the Republicans were to come into power. Project 2025 is a phenomenally detailed vision statement of every step they're going to take. And we just don't have the time to deal with all this chaos and foolishness. We got grown folk business to take care of. We got community to build. This is ridiculous.
And then, of course, you had Donald Trump claiming he knew nothing about it. But guess what? The Heritage Foundation, the author of Project 2025, they are lead sponsor of the Republican National Convention.
Time to get paid, blow up like
Fan-base exclusive audio rooms are here. Now tap, talk, and get paid. Monetize your live podcast and most engaging conversations. You can now create exclusive audio chat rooms only for your subscribers and biggest fans. And as a user, subscribe, listen, and talk to your favorite creators. Now tap, talk, and get paid. Because everyone's a fan of something, and everyone has a fan base.
Here's what's been going on. You've got various top Democrats who have been saying it's time for Biden to step down. Okay? But I want y'all to notice something. They never say who they want to run. Let me be real clear to everybody who's watching. For the last 3 years, top Democrats have tried to get President Biden to drop VP Harris from the ticket. They literally, some met with Biden, and he told them, hell no. He wasn't going to do it. So, what you need to understand, so this effort to get Biden to drop is not just about Biden. It's also about Harris. Okay, today, Adam Schiff, congressman from California, came out and said that it's time for Biden to drop out of the race. He, of course, is running for the United States Senate. You now got about 21 Democrat lawmakers who said that polling numbers show if they're not going to do well if Biden is at the top of the ticket. Here are all those particular names. Now, they're all basing this off of the performance in the debate on June 27th. But here's what's interesting. Democrats have spent more time in the last 20 days tearing Biden down than they have Trump. In fact, Republicans have been relatively quiet because the Democrats are doing all of their work. So let's go back to this particular poll that was taken. Go to my iPad. So this was released to Politico today. And so it's from this group called Blue Labs. Now, I want y'all to understand what's going on here. In this particular poll they did, or assessment, you see here where they said they interviewed 15,000 voters across 7 battleground states between July 5th and July 12th. Okay? Says their goal. We're looking for voters whose behaviors change depending on who the Democratic candidate is. Okay? Now, these are their top line findings. Alternative Democratic candidates run ahead of President Biden by an average of 3 points across the battleground states. Nearly every Democrat performs better than the president. But here's the critical line. This includes Vice President Harris, who runs better than the president, but behind the average alternative. Let's go further. So when you look in here, they lay out that an average of almost 3% of Trump voters in a Trump-Biden matchup switch to voting Democrat if there's an alternative candidate leading the ticket. Okay, let's keep going. Young voters, independents, and those who haven't voted since at least 2020 are most likely to increase support for the Democrat with an alternative candidate. So here they go. These are their 4 candidates in alphabetical order. Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona, Governor Wes Moore of Maryland, Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan. Now check this out. By nearly 2-to-1 margin, Democratic voters say the party should choose the best nominee no matter who if Biden doesn't run. I need y'all to understand why they're framing it this way. Because they don't want it to be Kamala Harris. Now watch this. Who should delegates nominate if Biden does not run? The best nominee, no matter who. According to Democrats, 56%. 33% say VP Harris. Look at the black number. 43% say best nominee, no matter who. 40% say Kamala Harris. And so then you see independents, youth, sporadic, Rust Belt. Again, I need y'all to understand what's going on here. What you have going on here is an effort by prominent Democrats to freeze out Kamala Harris because they've never wanted Kamala Harris on the ticket. Now, here's what I think is going on. The 2028 battle is happening right now. There are Democrats who want other candidates to run for president. They fear, this is what they fear. They fear Biden winning and then in a year or two resigning and thus handing the presidency to Kamala Harris. If that's the case, she then runs as the incumbent in 2028, freezing out the other candidates. It's going to be hard for the Democratic Party to have candidates run against an incumbent president, the first female president. So these Democratic operatives, they don't want to wait to 2032. They need Kamala Harris out of the way so they can run their folks. Now, you might say, well, I'm not sure. Okay, so answer this. If Biden drops out, the only person who can access the more than $300 million they've raised is Kamala Harris, because the money was given to the Biden-Harris campaign. There are 1,000 staffers on the campaign in 100 field offices around the country. Because of campaign finance laws, you cannot transfer that infrastructure from one campaign to the next. The DNC doesn't control that infrastructure. The campaign does. So, if the Democrats pick anybody but Vice President Kamala Harris, they have to completely build a national campaign from scratch. Fundraising from scratch, infrastructure from scratch. You got to do it on the fly while you're also trying to build a name ID nationally of these other candidates. All of these people, a lot of these Obama people, David Axelrod, John Favreau, Tommy Vietor, I can go on and on and on. I've tagged Julian Castro, former congressman. I've tagged Schiff. I've tagged so many others. Jonathan Alter. All of these people keep talking about, oh, this fresh Democratic face, this fresh young voice. We think anybody could beat Trump. But y'all notice, they never give a name. I'm trying to tell everybody out here what's going on. The play is they need to take Biden out to take Harris out. Oh, and by the way, Vice President Kamala Harris might be from California. Nancy Pelosi does not support Kamala Harris. If you thought Nancy Pelosi shanked Congresswoman Barbara Lee when she ran for the U.S. Senate by backing her boy Schiff, Nancy Pelosi does not support Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket. Do not be confused. Let's talk about this with my panel. Joining me today on the show, we have Robert Portillo, host, People, Passion, Politics, News and Talk, 1380 WAOK in Atlanta. Rebecca Carruthers, Vice President, Fair Election Center out of D.C. A. Scott Bolden, he is, of course, a political contributor. He's also, of course, worked with PACs with the National Bar Association, D.C. Democratic Party, chair, all that good stuff. He's a lawyer in D.C. Rebecca, I've been warning people for months, and it's happening before us. They want to take Biden out to take Harris out.
Roland, I'm thinking about your book, White Fear. One thing that we need to have a kitchen table talk about is that the Democratic Party, Republican Party are tools in which the Black community can use to advance their interests in this country. It does not mean that the Republican Party or the Democratic Party are always or are in the best interests of Black communities in this country. So I just want to say that so we get, as we're framing this conversation, this is absolutely about taking out Kamala Harris. We could go back to the 2020 campaign and we could look at those who do not support Kamala. Many, even among some of my former colleagues, I had conversations, especially with white women who said, oh, there was something about Kamala they just didn't like. And I asked every single one of them, tell me specifically, what is it about Kamala Harris that you do not like? And none of them could identify it to me. And some of those white women no longer talk to me, but that's okay. My point in saying all this and about white fear is that what we're seeing, I think I mentioned this on the show a few weeks ago, there's a difference between winning and power. These people here want power. They don't always care about winning because you don't have to get the W in order to coalesce power. One thing that I will also note for the audience, we know that the 2024 Joe Biden is different than the 2020 Joe Biden. We all know that. However, the 2024 Joe Biden is the same as the 2023 Joe Biden. If any of these people actually were concerned and cared, then they would have talked about this a year ago, last summer, before we even started going into the primary cycle for the Democratic nomination. There are things that could have been done last summer if they were interested at all in preserving Biden's legacy, if they were genuinely and authentically concerned with whether or not he could serve, they would have hashed this out, had this conversation, done all these things a year ago behind closed doors. To see it now and say, oh, well, it's because he had a bad debate. Every single one of those people who are talking publicly, every single one of those elected officials have had very bad debates, very bad public events, because I've seen them, right? So we know it's not about the pretense in which they're telling us that this thing is about, but it's clearly about who's actually going to be running the White House. And we know Joe Biden in the second term. We know that it's going to be Kamala Harris with outsized influence, but we also know, according to the Constitution, if Biden is not able to serve, which a lot of people are trying to say, oh, he's not going to be able to serve in the next 4 years, it will absolutely be Kamala. And finally, I will say, I also remember the summer of 2020, I was a part of a large group of Black women where we told Biden, hey, if your VP better be a Black woman, here is the short list. You need to pick someone from this list. Unfortunately, he did. And so Black women are paying attention because we hear what's going on, we see what's going on, and we don't like it.
Different polls have come out today, and I'm going to go over those a little bit later, talking about where Black people are. There's a poll that AP dropped that said 60+% of Democrats, people poll, want Biden to drop out, 65%. But the exact same poll says 57% of people want Donald Trump to drop out. But the Associated Press, Robert, focused on Biden and not Trump. And so then you got these people who are like, oh, look at this. 50% of African Americans say Biden should drop out. But 50% say he should stay in, which is the highest of any group. So the games being played here, Robert, are a trip. And I don't think you can use common sense that if Democrats have attacked Biden's greatest weakness for 20 consecutive days, common sense tells you you're going to see erosion in the polling numbers.
Well, I call this the Hollywood coup. because I find it interesting that it's very much a coup being led out of California, New York, Washington, D.C., the major think tanks around the country. But the polling data does in no way, shape, or form back up what the coup makers are pushing out there. There's a poll that came out today that said this is a 2.5-point race nationally, that in the swing states, Biden's up by 1 in Wisconsin, up by 3 in Michigan. He's trailing in Georgia, Arizona, but these are all things within the margin of error. And this is after President Trump survived an assassination attempt in the middle of the Republican National Convention. So Biden very much is in striking distance in all of these polling, and with a strong legislative kick, he can pull himself out of this malaise. So the question is, what the hell is really going on? Because at first we heard from all, for everybody who's watching, if you're watching on one of the major networks instead of here where you should have been watching, you saw all the people on the panels on MSNBC, on CNN, and all the other channels, they looked down at their phone in unison, and then they all looked up and said, it's time to kill Granddaddy. And at that point in time, they just laid into him in ways that we've never seen people lay into somebody during in a major presidential race. So there's shots being called from an income bracket above the president that think they can tell the president of the United States when it's time to step down and who should be the nominee for office. This is the most anti-democratic thing I think we've seen in American history. This is less democratic than January 6th in many ways. And for those Democrats who are pushing for this, how exactly can you say that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy when you use an undemocratic process to try to force a sitting president out after the primary process, nullifying the 14 million votes that Joe Biden received during the primary season, the 81 million votes they received in the 2020 election? How exactly do you change the 6+ states that have ballot access laws that say that unless Joe Biden is dead, he will be the nominee, or you'll have to call those state legislatures back into office, or back into session to change the state laws simply to allow you to put another candidate on the ballot? Besides the logistical points that you made about fundraising $500 million in 4 months, building nationwide name recognition, building an infrastructure and a field team on the fly, essentially, if Joe Biden steps down, is Democrats ceding this election in 2024, retreating to 2028, and hoping they can rebuild the party in 4 years under Trump. Now, I don't think anyone believes that is the best mechanism going forward when we're talking about a 2.5-point race. So then after they said it was about Joe Biden's debate performance, it finally came out a couple of days later. Well, it's really about the poll numbers, and that we, the elites of the party, we, the donor class of the party, we, the insiders of the party, believe that he can't win, and therefore we're going to push him out. When the hell has that ever been the standard for a presidential candidate? That if you're trailing at the convention, the party bigwigs, the people behind the curtain, the smoke-filled rooms get to decide who the nominee is. This is going back to the 1960s. This is going back to the period of time prior to there being binding primaries to select candidates. And I think that the people who support Joe Biden, there's nothing better that he can do than stay in this race and stand strong against the elites. He now gets to be the outsider candidate, running against both the Democratic and the Republican establishment, and running for the people of this nation. Now, we should watch out, though, because I remember after the Stephanopoulos interview, there was a report that there was a major medical incident on the plane that turned out to be false. And the first thing my wife said was they probably tried to kill him. Earlier today, there was an article that came out that said Biden would only step down if there was a major medical issue. And then later on in the day, we find out that he's been infected with COVID as somebody who's elderly. After the events of the last several weeks in America, there's nothing that we can put past the powers that be. We've never seen an internal coup from a political party where the people trying to bring down the president are quote-unquote insiders, people in the president's inner circle, anonymous West Wing sources, donors, led by George Clooney and Stephen Colbert, etc., trying to overthrow a sitting president. We've never seen a situation where 2 weeks later, the other presidential candidate is nearly shot in the head. So we need to pay attention to the people who are pulling these levers of power and determine who the hell is actually driving this ship and where we position ourselves within the system. This has now gone beyond any season of scandal, House of Cards, or Veep. This is a whole different ballgame that we're at in politics, and we have to be very cognizant of the games being played around us.
At least go to my iPad. AP had their story. James Carville tweets, nor is this the good news. There is still time to change direction. The bad news is time is running out. Scott, again, Carville names no one, doesn't name a candidate. What these folks want to do is they want to move Biden aside, go to the convention, and then the party elites work their magic, and they want to nominate a new presidential nominee and a new VP nominee. They absolutely want to sideline Vice President Kamala Harris.
Oh, okay, I can agree with your concepts and precepts and the panelists, but here's where your analysis is missing the point, all three of you all. But for Joe Biden looking and sounding old and failing miserably at that debate, but for that, we wouldn't be having this discussion, right? He is old, right? There are concerns about whether he can prosecute the case against Donald Trump. You look at Donald Trump, the reprobate, and you juxtapose that with Biden and his legislative performance and his leadership as president, it shouldn't even be close. But it is close because the reality is he's older, he's aged, he's 81, and it manifests itself differently than, let's say, someone who is older or younger who has aged differently, right? Okay, they want to move Kamala out. There is a way for them to use that $250 million, but they'd have to jump through a lot of hoops with the FEC and others if they were going to do a convention floor fight. Kamala makes all the sense in the world. I don't think that strategy that you say that you laid out, I agree that that's the point and that's their strategy. But here's the deal. Kamala is super popular with young people, black and brown voters, gay voters, anti-abortionists. I mean, she would make all the sense in the world, and it's easy for her to just spend that $250 because those are the coalitions that we're leaking.
Well, wait, Scott. Wait, Scott. But all of these Democrat elites, they keep saying she's a drag on the ticket. She's not popular. She's horrible. She's been a disaster. No. What I'm saying is that's what they've laid out. And the fact of the matter is that is the narrative that they have established. And I'm telling you, I know from my sources, they literally went to Biden and said to him, he needs to drop her from the ticket. He told them, hell no, I'm not doing it.
Are those Democrats in name only? They must be, because they're drinking the Republican Kool-Aid. I mean, this is a brilliant woman who could prosecute the case against Trump better than Joe Biden could ever at 81. Those coalitions, they come back home to us no matter what. And she has $250 million to bring the heat. And her debate, whether it's J.D. Vance or her debate against Trump, would be magnificent because she's prosecuted lots of different cases. In fact, I think she'd be a better candidate than Biden right now, and it'd be easier to do.
Well, 1 second. Now, here, because I was talking to, and I'm going to bring in Rebecca and Robert as well. I was talking to a couple of pollsters, and this is the concern. And see, this is where folks don't want to truly start just breaking down demos. Mm-hmm. So this is what I got here. 1 second. And I was talking to one last week. So when you look at polling data, Biden leads among white seniors, white women, white college student, and white suburbs. That's about 70% of the electorate. Where have they been lagging? They've been underperforming among black voters, Latino voters, and young voters. So, pollster says he can win. They said that Project 2025 could bring those black voters home. Abortion could bring the young voters home. He says Latino voters are the wild card. But Matt Barreto, who is one of the top Latino analysts, pollsters, they put out, give me 1 second, they put this out 6 days ago. Biden leads Trump, go to my iPad, Biden leads Trump by 17 points among Latinos. Matt says Biden can increase his advantage from plus 17 to plus 30 among Latinos if he hits Trump hard and the contrasts on several different issues that he lays out right here. So, the point here is while all of these other people are going crazy, I saw they were like, Oh my God. Poll comes out. Trump is leading Biden by 3 in Virginia. They were just going nuts. New poll today drops, shows Biden up 5 to 7 in Virginia. So it's like they're going crazy. And what they keep saying is, well, this percentage of people, they want a new candidate. They wanted a new candidate in a primary in 2020. They eventually chose Biden. They wanted a new candidate in the general in 2020. But when it came down to Biden Trump, they chose Biden. Yeah. So I get the old part. I totally get it. But the problem here is, if you're Democrats and you are hammering your ticket on a big issue, the Republicans could just do this here. Y'all got it. Go right ahead.
Right. But Roland, let me just say real quick before you go to the other panelists is this. And that is this. What's misleading about those polls is how the question is posed. Do you think he should drop out because of his age? 70% say yes. But now if you ask them the same thing, if Biden's on the ticket and he's the nominee and you're going to vote for him, then he's even ahead by 2 points in most polls or behind by 2 points in most polls. But the fact that they think he shouldn't be in the race doesn't really tell you a whole lot, does it?
Dude, that's what I've been saying.
It doesn't tell you anything.
And roll on that same point.
So hold on. So right here. So like here's a tweet right here. There have been 6 polls conducted or partially conducted after the assassination attempt on Trump. 4 of them swing towards Biden. I mean, this man, Robert, has been literally under assault from news media, New York Times, Land Journal-Constitution, columnists, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, everybody. They are critiquing. He kills it at the NAACP, and it's like, oh my God, look at this. He garbled a couple of words. Like, it's as opposed to this was this whole speech he gave. And I'm like, he has withstood the most vicious attack I have ever witnessed on a party's nominee, and he's still in striking distance. What the hell are these people doing?
Look, Roland, beware the Ides of March. The Caesar told us exactly about this. The long knives are out, and these are people who are looking out for their own political future as opposed to the future of the nation. And if they truly believe what they've been telling us, that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, that he's trying to bring about a neo-fascist revolution, that he is going to align America with Viktor Orban, with Lukashenko, with Giorgia Meloni, with the Erdogans of the world, and this far right-wing populist version of what we're seeing in Argentina today, then I think that they should be saying to themselves, well, what is that gives us the best chance of winning? Like I said, this is a 2.5 point race. And what people forget is Joe Biden has the power of incumbency, and he needs to wield that thing like the damn Infinity Gauntlet at this point in time. The Supreme Court just said you can do whatever the hell you feel like as president. I'm going to test that to the umpteenth extent. Biden people, come here. Bring the camera on me, Biden people. Look, what you do is Monday morning, Biden has a 10 a.m. press conference. He has an executive order on gun violence, saying that in the wake of what happened to President Trump and the rash of gun violence that's happening nationwide, including school shootings and name off the statistics, I am hereby by executive order banning the manufacture of assault weapons in the United States, and then dare Republicans and dare the Supreme Court to overturn that. Tuesday morning, press conference. By the powers vested in me by the United States Constitution in Section 2, I am having an executive order on women's reproductive right. We will walk women into the reproductive health clinic with the National Guard like they did Ruby Bridges if you try to interfere with the exercise of their constitutional rights, and then dare them to take you to court. Wednesday, press conference, 10 a.m., executive order. I'm hereby dealing with the southern border by executive order, and until Congress does something about it, this will be the law of the land. If you want this to continue, then you keep me in office. And you do this every day, and you keep doing it, and you flood the zone like football. If somebody's sitting back in a cover 2 zone, you send slants across the middle until they bring those safeties up, and then you go deep on them. And that's what President Biden has the power to do, to put so many executive orders out there that the Republicans can't afford to fight all of them in court. They can't afford to try to drown him out. And then you change the national conversation to about what you're doing. You build the kinetic energy of re-election, and you end up winning. If you can be at 2.5 points at the lowest level of your campaign, you can win this thing by 5.5 points, given the right policies and given the right strategies. But you're not going to win it in a circular firing squad where you have the people who are closest to you with the long knives out. This is an et tu Brutus moment where you have to figure out who are the people with the long knives, change course, change direction, get in the right room with the right people, and really push forward to victory.
I'm going to go to Rebecca before I go to my next guest. Rebecca, this is very simple. Black people are, I dare say, the smartest voting constituency in America. Black people are pragmatic. They are folk who we didn't love. I mean, as I look at that Ida B. Wells Barnett painting, Ida B. Wells Barnett, her birthday was yesterday, campaigned on behalf of Herbert Hoover, who was the head of the Lily White faction of the Republican Party. They had to make a decision. Do I support this Klan-loving Democrat, or do I support this white racist Republican? Black people have made conscious voting decisions for a very long time. In 2020, black folk were not loving Joe Biden. It was 15 people: Bloomberg, Deval Patrick, Elizabeth Warren, Klobuchar, Sanders, Corey, Kamala had dropped out. It's a bunch of other folks I'm leaving off. And they were like, Joe can beat him. That's what happened. They were not loving Joe. People not walking around going, oh my God, I just love me some Joe Biden. They're sitting there going, black people are going, his ass evil. Who can beat his evil ass? Okay? Joe can get them old white people. Joe can get them white women. Joe can get them white suburbs. He ain't gonna talk to them white folks in Scranton. You know what? We're gonna go with that old white dude. Am I missing something here, Rebecca?
So I heard Scott earlier say, oh, well, these must be Democrats in name only. No, this is politics. Politics is nasty work. This same thing happened to Bernie Sanders versus Hillary in 2016. Let's not forget. Instead, we're seeing this instead of happening during the nomination process. We're seeing the actual sitting president being stabbed in the back, people attempting to change rules and to block people out, especially when we see Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer today saying, oh, well, we should delay the roll call. Hello, Ohio. We can't not rely on Ohio or the Ohio courts to then rule that it's okay for Democrats to do that. Because remember, August 7th is the deadline in which whoever the nominee is who will be on the ballot in Ohio has to be submitted to Ohio. We can't then expect the state courts there to say, okay, Democrats, if you file a lawsuit saying, hey, give us an extra opportunity to actually fill in that line on the ballot line, that will allow you. Newsflash, that Ohio court, in the makeup of that Ohio court, it's not going to allow for that to happen. They're going to see this as, hey, this is easy work. This is an easy win. We're guaranteeing that Biden is not successful in Ohio. And as an aside, most people don't think Biden's going to win Ohio anyway. However, Democrats shouldn't be making it so easy to lose. Even if they think that Joe Biden is going to be a loser in November, why would you make it this easy? Why would you literally expose your candidate and also expose your entire ballot to this mess? It just doesn't make sense unless this is about power. It's not actually about winning. So I hear you, Scott, when you're saying, well, you don't think that these machinations are really the machinations, or in our analysis might be off. This isn't really what these people are thinking. But I need to understand, what is the counter rational argument to explain exactly what they're doing? Because we know this isn't just about a bad debate performance. They took the opportunity of the bad debate performance to say, okay, let's push Biden out. It doesn't matter what Biden did, because we know Biden does a lot of gaffes. He's not a great campaigner. Duh, we've known that since the 80s, right? But we know that he does a relatively good job in governing, whether he's the vice president or the president.
Time to get paid, blow up like
Fan base exclusive audio rooms are here. Now tap, talk, and get paid. Monetize your live podcast and most engaging conversations. You can now create exclusive audio chat rooms only for your subscribers and biggest fans. And as a user, subscribe, listen, and talk to your favorite creators. Now tap, talk, and get paid. Because everyone's a fan of something, and everyone has a fan base.
I'm blowing up like you thought and if you don't know.
During an MSNBC interview, former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi refused to fully commit to supporting President Biden remaining in the 2024 race. The California Congresswoman says it's Biden's decision to run.
Over the past 24 hours behind the scenes, there's been a lot of depression among Democrats. The phone lines burning up, concerned about his candidacy and whether or not he can win. And some even out loud are shaky at best about President Biden, whether or not he should step out of the race. The headlines, the polling, it all feels very dark. How do you think the president is doing in light of his poor debate performance? Can he do more? And what do you say to Democrats in Congress and even members of the Senate who are beginning to waver in their support?
Good morning, Mika. That's one version of the story. What I do want to say is that yesterday I was honored to be present at the president's speech at NATO. He was absolutely spectacular. He was received over and over again with ovations for what he had to say and the force with which he said it. And then he gave the Presidential Medal of Freedom to Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO. I felt very honored by that because, as one who has received it, Jens getting it brought luster to that honor. So it was a beautifully received, energetic presentation by the president. Politics is politics. People have their interest in terms of their own region and the rest. And so we are the Democratic Party, a party that is, shall we say, not lockstep. But this president has been a great president. And I can tell you firsthand, as a person who orchestrated many of the pieces of legislation that the president takes great pride in, and he should, because he was there at the table, chapter and verse, very conversant, with a vision, a purpose, with the knowledge of the issues, with values underlining it all, and again, always asking the question, what does this mean to working families in our country? So any thought that he wasn't able to deliver on all of those is, I can just say, just didn't happen.
So, Madam Speaker, you just went through the president's record, but let me ask you about the current moment. Does he have your support to be the head of the Democratic ticket? As
long as the president it's up to the president to decide if he is going to run. We're all encouraging him to make that decision because time is running short. I think overwhelming support of the caucus. It's not for me to say. I'm not the head of the caucus anymore. But he's beloved. He is respected, and people want him to make that decision, not me.
He has said he has made the decision. He has said firmly this week he is going to run. Do you want him to run?
I want him to do whatever he decides to do. And that's the way it is. Whatever he decides, we go with. I think it's really important, and I would hope everyone would join in, to let him deal with this NATO conference. This is a very big deal. Over 30 heads of state are here. He is the host of it, and that means not just hosting, it means orchestrating the discussion and setting the agenda, and he's doing so magnificently. And I've said to everyone, let's just hold off. Whatever you're thinking, either tell somebody privately, but you don't have to put that out on the table until we see how we go this week. But I'm very proud of the president.
Now, Joy, I have a couple questions here. One, why isn't that Hakeem Jeffries doing that sit-down interview? Well, you're Speaker Emerita, or whatever it is that Nancy Pelosi decided to call herself. That means you're passing the baton to the next generation. Not that you are still there in the front and in the limelight. It's very much almost an overseer role, that I will allow this younger black man to take over the leadership of the House, but I'll still be there over his shoulder, making sure that things go a certain way. Why do you think that for the first time we have a black man as the leader of House Democrats, but we still have someone else speaking on behalf of House Democrats?
Well, I think she was very clear in saying that she's not speaking on behalf of House Democrats. And let me just tell you, Hakeem Jeffries is a strong leader. He can handle Nancy Pelosi. It is not me to comment on their interpersonal working relationships. She is incredibly popular within the Democratic Party, including amongst African Americans, and she's still a strong voice. So if, we are double the blessing with both of them, that is not my problem. If he likes it, I love it. And it works for him, and perhaps he's a strong leader, and he is not threatened by this strong woman out there who is echoing him and can maybe say some things that maybe he can't say because he is in the position, and so his voice would actually matter more. So not worried about it at all, not a thing.
Okay, Rebecca, I find it interesting that Donald Trump was on trial for sex with multiple porn stars and falsifying business records, and the Speaker of the House showed up outside the courthouse in a Trump uniform, along with every other Republican elected official with the red tie on, the white shirt, the navy blue suit. Yet we can't get House Democrats to stand by President Biden for being old. Why do you think there's such a difference in the commitment that the base has to their candidate?
Robert, that's the question. So I'll answer that question, but I'm also going to answer the question that you posed to Joy. I don't think this is about Democratic leadership with the reason why former Speaker Nancy Pelosi took that interview. Here's the thing. In this town, there are only a couple people that Joe Biden is currently listening to as far as taking advice. There's also only a couple people in this town currently who could tell him, hey, it's time for you to take a step back. It's time for you to get off the ticket. And Nancy Pelosi is one of those two people who tell him that at this point, in which he would actually seriously think about whether or not he remains on the ticket or not. I don't think this has anything to do with Hakeem Jeffries being a black man, the first to be black speaker in the House representing the Democrats. I think it's more of a who is President Biden listening to politically, and who has enough of that. I can't think of the word right now, and who is credible enough to actually pull his coattail if that's what's needed in this moment. But to your question of why did Republican leadership show up outside of the court hearing, outside of the three-ring circus that is Trump, that's apples and oranges. That's not even a fair comparison here, because we are in bizarro world right now. The fact is not just the fact that it is it's a person who has been convicted of a felony that's seeking office, because I believe in second chances. I believe in reenfranchisement back into society, but it's specifically that someone who has committed and who has gone on record of committing over 30-something felonies that he's been convicted of in the last few years, and now is seeking to become president again. I think that's the issue, is that he, in real time is still apt to commit additional felonies in getting power back. So I'm not going to compare the Democratic leadership to what we're seeing on the Republican side, because it doesn't even make sense in this case.
And now, Scott, the question I'm still trying to figure out is exactly how this Democratic strategy would work legally, because you have, I think, a half dozen states where you would have to change the state laws in order to change the name on the ballot. You have at least 20 Republican attorneys general that will take a case to the Supreme Court to force Biden to be on that ballot if you did try to switch it. Just from a legal basis, how exactly would work this idea of Biden stepping aside?
Well, before I answer that, why are you being messy with that question? Dr. Pelosi against Hakeem. You're just being messy.
I've never seen a retired
I agree with my colleagues.
I have never seen a retired speaker show up to speak on someone's shoulder.
Talking that shit. That's what you're doing. Okay, but they handled that, so I don't have to weigh in on that. Legal standpoint, here's what happens. If Joe Biden resigns or steps down, the ticket, Kamala moves up automatically, right, as part of that Biden-Harris team, right? Secondly, she doesn't get a chance, watch this, to pick a vice president. I think it's the Senate or the House, one of those would have, she could name somebody. They couldn't be on the ballot because it's too long. If she wins, then it would go to the delegates, basically, or the super delegates. That is the delegates or the electors, rather. It would go to the electors. I take that back. It would go to the electors, and the electors who do the transfer of power, like on January 6th that Donald Trump tried to kill off, those electors would vote for her vice president, right? Doesn't happen very often. I think it's happened one in the 1800s, but the electors would vote her vice president. And quite frankly, who knows what would happen then? You could argue, you could have a vice president that was a Republican, if you will. Who knows, given how crazy these times are. But she could recommend somebody, but she wouldn't be, he or she wouldn't be automatically selected. The electors would do that. The other thing is, it makes sense for her to move up because all the white privileged folks who want to bring these other people in, you'd have to have a floor fight. You'd have to have a mini primary. That's expensive, and we don't have time for that. It's so much simpler with her moving up. The electors would do a vice president. She's got $240 million, and she can prosecute the case against Donald Trump. I think better than Biden, quite frankly. So all of those are attributes that if Biden were to step down, right? If Biden were to step down, then she would automatically move up. She's super popular with the base. The Republicans hate her. There's a reason Republicans hate her. Because they know that she's grown in this position too, by the way. She's been on the national stage, and she's got a lot of humility and a lot of credibility. And she's quite electable. When you got white senators and white congressmen saying, well, the president ought to step down and Kamala ought to move up, that's pretty powerful. Those white folks, those ain't even black and brown people saying that. So on the legal side, that's what would happen.
Can I ask a question of Scott?
Yeah.
So I think here also we're making a distinction between like post-convention versus pre-convention, because the party still, even right now, he's our nominee, but he's not our official nominee yet, right? So that will happen at the party convention. So there is still time. There is a different.
Yeah.
Say it one more time.
I'm talking about post-convention. You're right.
Post-convention.
Pre-convention, she moves up and she names whoever in the nomination, and the convention votes on it.
Exactly.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yes, and I think what we're hearing others say is wherever we find ourselves at convention, that's it. Okay? We're not looking to do all of that. If the president is going to make a different choice, then the time to do it would be, I would say, shortly before the convention, not giving too many people too much leeway and lead time. But that's my view. But I think, but it has to be before then. We don't want to wait till afterwards. And there's a distinction there. And then that will be plenty of time to pivot. And frankly, could be exciting if that's what we ultimately decide to do. But we also, wherever we are, at convention, we ought to be excited about that. And let me tell you, if you're a George Clooney, Michael Douglas, James Carville, random people that most young folks don't even know who they are. Okay, are they dead yet? Who cares? So if like those people know what they actually offend people, because we cannot believe that they feel privileged to speak on our behalf and to offer their opinion, and we have to offer our opinion. That's why I'm speaking full-throatedly about them with no fear, could care less. The reason they're talking on through back channels, the reason they're talking through op-eds is that they are not in inner circles anymore making decisions. We made a choice to move those people out. Goodbye. We are making different decisions with different folks, and they are trying to assert themselves. I won't speak. I work in Washington, so I won't name any senators' names, but many of them are only getting headlines because they are speaking about this. Do not overlook that as a motivation to continue talking. If you think Joe Biden should be doing something different, use your emotional intelligence. Those are private conversations. I want to associate myself with the gentlelady from California, Nancy Pelosi. Those are private conversations. You do not have them publicly. And any insider understands that. This is amateur hour by people who want to make headlines for themselves.
Okay, but that
since Joy can't name names,
hold on, Scott. Let's go to Rebecca first and come back to you, okay?
Guys, we don't have
time. Go to Rebecca and we're coming back to you, Scott, all right? All right, go ahead, Rebecca.
So, I mean, look, Joy is not naming names, but I will say when I see a senator like a John Tess of Montana, who's already in a very competitive race and is trying to figure out how does he keep this as a Montana race and where he's not being thrown into, he has to defend the National Democratic Party, then of course he's going to pipe up and he's going to say something because it is in his best political interest to draw daylight between himself and what's happening in Washington, D.C. That is the only way he survives this election and gets reelected coming out of Montana, because it is one of those Senate seats that the Democratic Party needs if they're trying to hold on to the Senate in the next Congress. The other thing is, Joy is right. A lot of people don't know who the heck James Carville is. I wish he would go somewhere and quit talking, but I don't get all of my wishes. And then even with like a George Clooney, most young people, if they do know him, it's probably because of his tequila. I heard he has a good tequila. But that said, the Democratic Party actually has a memo that James Zogby circulated almost 2 weeks ago, actually about a week and a half ago, and they ended up getting published in the New York Times. So there is a formal plan if this thing was to happen between now and at the convention.
Yeah, but Rebecca, I agree with my colleagues.
Look, Rebecca, I find it really interesting also the fact that you have these kind of kingmakers in the Democratic Party that can just decide who is and who isn't the president. But how exactly do you run on a campaign that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy? Then you use an undemocratic process to force out the Democratic nominee that won the primary process. I think it's going to be a hard circle to make for the election. Scott, I know you wanted to chime back in, so I wanted to start with a question for you. You can answer at your leisure. But for the Democratic establishment, how is it easier to go through the entire process you just laid out for replacing the candidate versus just circling the wagon around Biden and figuring out a way to win?
Well, it's easier. Oh, were you talking to me?
Yeah.
Well, you know what, Scott? I'm going to pull a quick Scott. If there was actually kingmakers, then Hillary Clinton would have been president.
True. Go ahead,
and
Scott.
Wouldn't that have been better?
Hey, I'm the oldest one on the panel. I forgot what I wanted to say. See, you ain't got to be 80 to forget what you got to say. I'm telling y'all right now. I'll be in court and be running out, and my sentences run on until I can figure out what's next in the damn argument. Let me just say this, though. You're right. It would be easier. The problem with coalescing around Biden is he scares the hell out of you. Because he's old. He looks old. He sounds old. He walks like he's old. And he's not who he was 8 years ago. He's a great leader. But is he the one to prosecute the case against Trump? We're losing to a convicted felon. It shouldn't even be close, right? And so on one hand, the Democrats say it's easy to just get behind Biden, right? But what happens to us coalescing around Biden when he does the press conference and can't get through it the right way, just basically? Or he does another debate with Trump, and Trump says again, I don't know what he said, and I don't think he knows what he said. Ouch. And that's why we're wringing our hands with what to do. We don't have good choices, and we don't have any leverage to force him out.
Rebecca?
Part of it is us. We are
sorry,
stupid.
Joy, go ahead.
Part of it is us. We are stupid. Donald Trump, we are stupid as Democrats. Donald Trump literally during the debate said the Democrats attempt to abort babies after birth.
Right.
And we just
he's a sociopathic liar.
Guys,
but why is he beating us then? Why is he beating us? See, that all sounds good and is right, but he's beating us.
But part of the reason
is he?
That we are not loyal and we don't know how to stay the course and we freak out instead of focusing. Don't freak out, focus. Whatever decision, I love having this conversation. It's a lot of fun. Nobody's calling any of the four of us on this call. I wish they were. Maybe Scott, he makes a lot more money. So, perhaps he is. But here's the thing. For the rest of us, we don't need to worry so much about what's going to happen. We just need to be ready to pivot and to focus on the issues and to focus on making the case that Donald Trump is not the answer for the nation. Not only is not the answer, he is a detriment to the nation and the world. That is our focus. And what I love is Black people get that. They get that. They're like, I understand the assignment. It's not about Biden, Kamala, whatever. In this case, it's about Democrat, D. It's about D, because that is what is required to save the nation, and we're going to rise to the occasion. So wherever we find ourselves, and we need white America to be similarly focused. These conversations are being had predominantly by rich, wealthy, progressives, white people, okay, who have very few stakes. The people who look like us have, even those who are well-heeled, like all of us, especially Scott, have much at stake. And we get it. And we get it. So we need...
Are you messing with my money?
Okay.
Are you messing with my money? I got a little bit. I got a little bit.
I'm trying to have a little bit of that money.
Look, Rebecca, on this point, what I'm trying to figure it out with the Biden to go people is this about health or is this about poll numbers? Because it seems like it started out saying, oh, Biden is so sick and so old he can't run. And then it turned into, look, he's losing. We got to get rid of him to get him a last chance. Is the health concerns just a raison d'etre to get rid of Biden? Or are they really simply saying, we think he's going to lose, maybe we can switch him out and still save the House and Senate?
Yeah.
You know what? That's a complicated question, but I'll answer it the best way that I can. To be clear, I think folks need to focus on whether or not someone can perform, because it's not just the issue of age, right? Making sure that we're not venturing into ageism, but it's also cognitive function, cognitive decline. Is this person able to step up and do what's required in this moment? I think what some of the initial hand-wringing was from is that that debate performance was bad. And it sobered a lot of people up because there are a lot of real world things are going on domestically and internationally. We need a president that is fully on, that is very hands-on over the next 4 years. And so I do think there's some concern. Now, there were some folks up to this point who, when Biden mentioned 4 years ago that he was only going to run for one term, that actually got some people, remember it was the coordinated day when everyone dropped out at the same time during the primary. So after South Carolina, Biden really didn't have a true primary after that because there was a coordinated effort. And he also floated around the idea that he wasn't going to run for a second term. And so to all those folks who are saying, hey, well, we knew Biden was old 4 years ago, well, you knew if he got elected and then reelected, he was going to be even older, right? So I get some of those arguments that people are making, but I think to the general public, I think there is an underlining. People are dissatisfied with our two-party system because we're not, as Americans, we're not really getting what we need in order to move the country forward in a positive way, in a way that makes sense. We're actually getting policy done because largely, Washington is broken the way it's currently working. I will say, if for those of you who might read, some of this nation's founders, I believe it's Federalist Paper number 10, where it says, beware of factions, i.e. beware of political parties, because it's not good for democracy in America. And so even looking at this nomination process, the Constitution spells out how to go about selecting a president in this country. And what's unfortunate is that we have outsourced that to political parties. And I think that is to the detriment of democracy in America. It should not be the Democrat nominating process. It should not be the Republican nominating process. But I think for this country to move forward in a positive way that's pro-democracy, we're going to have to figure out how to get out of this diametrically opposed two-party system, because I don't think ultimately that is in the long-term benefit for America.
And Joy, on that point, Rebecca earlier mentioned Reagan had early stages of Alzheimer's. Ron Reagan has confirmed that his second term. James Baker attempted to invoke the 25th Amendment in 1987, I believe. President Kennedy, he was riddled with back pain, was on so many prescription medications, often he couldn't get out of bed, had Addison's disease, had polio, etc. FDR, of course, famously had polio, died in office, was in a wheelchair the entire time. Woodrow Wilson, after the negotiations over the Treaty of Versailles with Clemenceau and Mountbatten, he had a stroke and was effectively bedbound and in a coma the last 2 years of his presidency. And we seem to have been fine as a nation, despite those things taking place. Should Democrats just de-emphasize the particular president and say you're voting for an administration, you're voting for a team, Absolutely. You're voting for a Department of Justice, you're voting for Supreme Court justices, you're voting the federal court. It doesn't matter who's at the top, you're voting for an entire legislative agenda.
I keep trying to tell y'all this. It's about the party. It's the whole apparatus. And let's be clear. I mean, I understand what you're trying to say and doing historical analysis. There's a very difference between having a cognitive decline, right, and having a physical decline. Physical, I'm not worried about that. I don't think any of us should be worried about that. Matter of fact, I think we should embrace. Governor of Texas has a physical disability, is partially paralyzed, and he can do plenty of evil. So, he's very, very, very able to do that. So we should not engage in any ableism. But of course, having a cognitive decline is different. I am not aware of any medical reports that Biden is undergoing a cognitive decline. You could say, well, I don't believe it. I can see my eyes, whatever. I mean, I'm not a doctor. I'm not an armchair doctor. I don't play one on TV. And so, for me, I'm happy to wait if he feels like there needs to be some medical evidence of that. I think that they have been some forthcoming with reports from his doctor. Maybe we need to hear more. But we're making so many assumptions. And it's also very unfair because when he was at the State of the Union, everyone was singing his praises. He was fantastic last night at NATO. So he definitely had a bad debate performance, and it is clearly one that he is self-admitted he's just not good at it, never has been, and is getting worse. Who cares? I actually don't think he should debate Trump. It's not a good, when you're in a position, you're the president of the United States, you have the big plane. You do what works for you. If it doesn't work for you, you don't do it. And we're in an era where the expectations have gone. We don't have to put on pretenses. Donald Trump puts on no pretenses. The man is a convicted felon. The rule book is thrown out. I would take Joe Biden in his cognitive state, whatever it is, over Donald Trump 7 days a week, twice on Sunday.
Time to get paid, blow up like.
Fanbase exclusive audio rooms are here. Now tap, talk, and get paid. Monetize your live podcast and most engaging conversations. You can now create exclusive audio chat rooms only for your subscribers and biggest fans. And as a user, subscribe, listen, and talk to your favorite creators. Now tap, talk, and get paid. Because everyone's a fan of something, and everyone has a fan base.
President Joe Biden made it clear that the only way he would not drop out of the 2024 presidential election was if his team told him he could not win. In his unscripted press conference, the 81-year-old spoke and answered questions for nearly an hour. Biden told Americans he was the most qualified person to run for president and that we can't afford to lose what we've done. Now, House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries wrote to his colleagues that he met with Biden to discuss his caucus members' conclusions about the path forward amid the president's embattled re-election campaign. Several Democrats on Capitol Hill have publicly called on him to step aside, but others, like my next guest, are supporting the president. Joining me now on the phone is California Congresswoman Maxine Waters. Congresswoman, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
You're absolutely welcome, and I'm delighted to be with you. And it's so important that you're giving us the opportunity to talk about what's going on during this election time with Biden and with Trump. I'm ready to go.
Right. And certainly you are ready to go, and you have been ready to go quite a while in terms of your unwavering support for the president. Talk to us a little bit about what's going on behind the scenes. People think that we're not hearing something or not seeing something because we do see a lot of headlines about people perhaps privately asking about his health and what he's going through. Can you tell us anything about what's going on behind the scenes that might be a lot different from the narrative that's out there?
I don't know how much different it is, but I can tell you this. There has been a decision by some that they are not going to support him. And the reason that they give is he's too old, he's not capable, that something may be wrong mentally, on and on and on. Whatever the reasons are, there is a plot, and it is being organized to try and get this president to so-called step aside. And I had a talk with some young people in Chicago today about stepping aside. And I was reminded, and we discussed it a lot, that step aside simply means that the president will be president up until January. They're not saying resign. They're not saying get out of the presidency, because if he did, Kamala would automatically become the president. She's the vice president. And if the president resigns or something happens to them where they cannot perform their duties, that's what the vice president does. The vice president takes over. But in this plot that's going on, there is an attempt to get him to step aside and not resign because they would rather we lose the ability for Kamala to be president or even to remain vice president. And so it's a lot of tricks going on. But anyhow, you take a look at the number of people in the House of Representatives. I think it's up to about 19 now. And television keeps saying that, there's a huge call to make him step aside, to get him to step aside. But 19 out of 213 is not huge. And what you see are, members, most of them, I think, maybe believe that he cannot perform his duties, that somehow he won't be able to beat Trump. I don't know what they think, but something is going on. And I support Biden staying. He is our Democratic nominee. He won in the primaries, which makes him our nominee. And we should get behind him, and we should work with him, and we should ensure that he has the opportunity to get on that campaign trail and beat Trump the way he has already done. He beat him before. He can beat him again.
Now, Congresswoman, certainly this has been an interesting process so far in terms of this campaign, beginning with what happened on June 27th with that early debate. And the president has done many things in order to try to make up for that or show that he is the one to be chosen. What do you think are the next steps in terms of what he should do on the campaign trail to make sure that people are behind him? Just strategy-wise, what are we going to see?
Well, absolutely. And he's committed to staying out there, going to all of our frontline states, making speeches, explaining his public policy. But I think that in addition to what he's doing, that the secretaries, the appointees, all of those people who are carrying out his strategies should be out on the campaign trail also. And I do believe that all of the members of the House of Representatives need to do a better job of explaining the policies, how they work, what he has accomplished, what it means to have the lowest unemployment that we have had for many, many years, what it means to have an infrastructure program that creates contracts and jobs and opens up opportunities for minorities to be involved in procurement in the ways that they have not been involved historically. He is good on everything from climate change to reproductive rights to support for small businesses, doing everything that was needed during COVID to make sure that the frontline workers had everything that they need to be protected, like the nurses and the doctors, and making sure that they get the vaccines into minority communities because they had not been doing it before. Trump had told us just to drink some bleach. And so the comparison, there's no comparison. I mean, Biden is an honorable, upright man. Trump is a liar. He's deceptive, he's destructive, and he's divisive.
I wanted to jump in and talk about the vice president for a moment, just in terms of positioning her so that more people will recognize what she has been doing. Many have been trying to make the argument that she has been doing quite a bit, but we haven't heard about it. And I'm wondering what you can let us in on in terms of what's going on behind closed doors to find out what is going to happen with her positioning and how she's positioning herself right now on this election campaign.
Well, first of all, as the vice president, she's running as a team with Biden. They are a team. They're running together, do not tend to be separated. She's been out on the campaign trail and has attracted a lot of support from women, talking about reproductive rights, women's rights. She's been excellent on those issues. She also has been excellent on dealing with small and minority businesses and education and all of these issues. Some people don't pay attention to the issue unless it's an issue that they care about. Well, if you care about health care, if you care about not only contracting and the opportunities for people to have jobs and positions that they've not had before, like diversity and inclusion, then you know what she's been saying and what she's been doing, and she's going to keep on doing that. Last night, she was on international policy, talking about what is going on with Ukraine. And so she's well qualified. She's well equipped to do what needs to be done. She's been an asset to Biden, and the two of them working together have kept their promises.
I want to end on this question. George Clooney in his op-ed in the New York Times, I'm sure you have something to say to him about staying in his lane. And I just wanted to give you the opportunity to speak to the George Clooneys of the world who are making their opinions be known in a big fashion.
Well, what I want to do is I want to make known to people of color and to women and to poor people and to working people, all who have been helped with this presidency. We've got the power. I don't care what anyone celebrity has to say. We've got the power, and we better know how to use it and exercise it. We're going to have a significant number of delegates at the convention. We are going to have the opportunity to vote like we have never voted before, at least as well as we have voted before, in order to support our nominee. Whether it is, the New York Times or, the Washington Post or any of the newspapers with the editorials, okay, they have a right to say or do what they want to, but they don't make the difference. They don't determine. It's the people who vote who make the difference. And I'm saying to our people, we've got to register, we've got to vote, we've got to show up, we've got to mail in those ballots, we've got to drop it in ballot boxes that are being set up, we've got to do whatever it takes to get our vote counted.
All right. I certainly know that we will be hearing more from you, of course, on this campaign trail and more. Congresswoman, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
You're welcome, and I'm available to you anytime.
All right. We're going to take you up on that. Good to see you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Time to get paid, blow up like.
Fanbase exclusive audio rooms are here. Now tap, talk, and get paid. Monetize your live podcast and most engaging conversations. You can now create exclusive audio chat rooms only for your subscribers and biggest fans. And as a user, subscribe, listen, and talk to your favorite creators. Now tap, talk, and get paid. Because everyone's a fan of something, and everyone has a fan base.
All sorts of drama as to whether or not President Joe Biden should stay in this race. Now, you've seen polling from different sources talking about how black voters feel about Biden in response to the debate. But they're not talking to just black people. Joining us right now is Adrian Shropshire, Executive Director of Black PAC. They have the new poll out, which shows exactly how African Americans, what they think about President Biden after the debate performance. So glad to have Adrian here. And so, Adrian, again, it's driving me crazy seeing these polls and seeing them talk about black people from the New York Times poll or YouGov and others, when there's a very small sample of black folks. Talk about the poll that y'all just released.
So we had a poll in the field when the debate happened, and we were trying to do in that poll what we're always trying to do, get the snapshot of where black voters are at any given moment throughout the cycle. And so the data that we released, and we actually have more data to release, we wanted to get this information out because it felt like it was important for the debate that was happening in the country. The data that we released shows, one, the kind of steady progress that the president's campaign has been making with black voters. And so one is that, so the one piece of information is that from our last poll in February to the poll in June, the president was actually increasing his support numbers among black folks. That's important because it means that the work that they've been doing to make sure that they're breaking through with black voters, it was actually working. The second piece of data that we released essentially says that for black voters who watched the debate, their support numbers for the president increased, right? So they watched the debate, they saw it with their own eyes, they saw two things on the debate stage. One, they saw Joe Biden give a very poor performance that I don't think anyone disagrees with, but they also saw a liar who stood on the stage and lied for 90 minutes. And they made a choice about which of those two candidates that they understood who they were before they watched the debate, but after the debate, increase their support for Biden. For those people who didn't watch the debate, we saw the opposite effect, which means that their understanding, people who did not watch the debate, their understanding of the debate was influenced by the post-debate narrative. And they didn't have the same level of support, increase in support for Joe Biden. And so that's important because it says that people are making decisions based on what they're seeing in their social media feeds or the sort of narrative that is emerging around what has happened that isn't exactly, I think, what people who saw the debate saw, right, with their own eyes. So that feels important, right, in terms of how impactful the things that people say about what is happening or how people interpret what's happening in the race has real implications for the way that the base sees what's happening.
So, Adrian, when looking at, again, your polling, so what we're seeing is that all the trepidation about Biden, his age, that we've seen since last year, closer you get to the election, folks go from, I don't know, to, yo, now I got to lock in. One of the things, all I heard today was Project 2025.
Yes.
I wasn't at Essence, but I got reports from people as well.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting to me is that while these Democrats on Capitol Hill are trying to, frankly, dump Biden, you have the base that's saying this is a clear and present threat that could very well change this election if they don't change the top of their ticket.
Yeah, so I feel like there is, I'm an organizer at heart. And so I'm always really clear that the thing that I don't ever want to do is get out in front of the base. And I think that what you just said is very accurate. And we've seen this, too. I mean, obviously, you've seen the searches for Project 2025 go up. I mean, Taraji P. Henson did everyone a solid when she stood on the stage and said Project 2025 is dangerous to us. Go look it up. Because I think that people are zoning in, right? People understand and understood before. I think that Black folks and the voters that we've talked to, whether it's in our focus groups or on the doors, right, where we're knocking doors in battleground states, are really clear about what the stakes are. I think that 2025, the Project 2025, and as people are, looking it up and trying to understand what it is and the implications that it has, not just for the country, but for Black people specifically, it only clarifies more how much danger, right, we are in as a nation. It makes the stark contrast and stark relief about the existential threat that Donald Trump poses, and that the Republican Party, which is, adopting 2025, whether they, are trying to distance themselves from it or not, you can look at what the Republican Party just put out as their national platform in 2025 and see where the overlap is, right? And so, I think that as those data points become clearer, as people see and hear Donald Trump, as they have been the entire time, and the kind of unhinged, rhetoric that he has on his rallies, the things that he said, at the debate, sort of doubling down on racism, right there on the debate stage, talking about the types of jobs that Black people deserve, talking about immigrants. People know what's at stake, and they're clear that we need to be on the side of democracy and saving this democracy as we have always done. But people are also really clear that we need to get the House in order to get about that business of making sure that Donald Trump doesn't see the inside of the White House again.
Adrian, I'm going to ask you another question before I got questions from Robert and the rest of the panel. And then that is, we're now in uncharted territory. You talk about being an organizer. You see what's happening on Capitol Hill. This is being driven by the party elites, these top donors. I talked to some prominent Democrats before I came onto the show. Congressional Black Caucus has been locked, strong and locked, saying you stick with Biden Harris. As an organizer, if these donors, and we saw what Nancy Pelosi did today on the Morning Joe, if they are successful in leaning on Biden to drop out, all the things that you talked about completely shut down, all forward progress, because now for the next month until the convention, you don't know what the hell is going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think Pelosi clarified her comments when she got back to her office and said that she thought that the New York Times in particular had misinterpreted what she said. But I do think that there is, I do worry about, there being not enough attention paid to what is actually happening on the ground. And I know that folks are saying that they're looking at polls, et cetera, but I also know what we're hearing as we're knocking on doors, and it just doesn't comport. And so I'm concerned about the base, because I think that in some ways this is not just a potential problem for this election. I think that it has the potential of having long-term damage within the Democratic Party. If the base feels like it is being disrespected. And we have to remember that there was a primary process and people voted and they voted overwhelmingly for Joe Biden. And I think, it is critical to not just simply dismiss the will of the people from the process that they understood to be the process that was going to get determine who the nominee was. And so I just think that there's some, folks need to be careful about what they're doing right now, and particularly given the conversation from the last part of the discussion about the vice president and the sort of early sort of rhetoric that we were hearing when people first started calling for the president to step aside with the notion that someone would replace him other than the vice president. And obviously that has toned down, and that you have folks now coming out and saying, of course I would support the vice president if she was the nominee. But I think that even the mere suggestion that the sitting black vice president of the United States would be jumped over already has potential to create disunity, and I think that disunity is not necessarily just in the short term, but can do long-term damage to the Democratic coalition.
Robert, for joining us this afternoon. I want to go straight to Scott Bolden for questions and the rest of the panel. Scott?
Yeah, thank you for being on. So when you're in the field, when you're in the field, so you're saying that the black voters in this country are still behind Biden, notwithstanding that performance, still anti-Trump, and that the Democratic Party needs to stay the course and stop talking about getting rid of Joe Biden. I think I'm right about that, right?
Well, what we haven't seen is any noticeable change in our conversation, right? So we haven't seen, when we're asking folks, what their top issues are, when we're asking them what their vote choices are going to be, we haven't seen the last 2 weeks any big change in that. Voters are still saying that they support, the majority support Biden. We see very little support for Donald Trump. We do see some support for third-party candidates, which again is something that needs to be taken into consideration in terms of strategy. So I think we are seeing steady responses from the black voters that we are talking to in battleground states. What I'm saying is that those who are in this conversation about how this nominating process is going to turn out really need to prioritize what voters are saying. And obviously, black voters are a part of the Democratic coalition, but a significant part of the Democratic coalition and significant part of the coalition that is going to elect any president to office. And so that attention needs to be paid to what folks are saying and where folks are. And I think that if we're not seeing significant abandonment, then the question of who should be the nominee, particularly that we've given the fact that there has been a process. And if you can't explain away to people how they voted for someone and then the nominee is going to change, like you have to bring people along in whatever process you think that you're leading.
I got you, but couple things. One, did you poll on whether they wanted Kamala Harris to replace Biden? And 2 weeks in the field was pretty close to right after the debate. From your expertise, is that too soon to get in the field to get reliable results?
Well, when I'm saying in the field, I'm talking about our literal door knocking, right? So not necessarily our polling. And we've been knocking on doors for months now. So what I'm comparing the sort of post-debate responses from voters about support for Biden, those responses post-debate aren't any different than the responses that we saw 2 months ago or 3 months ago. That's all I'm saying in terms of that. So, but I think that if voters are consistently saying that this is the candidate they're going to support, then that's what they mean. We did not and have not asked whether or not voters will support the vice president as the nominee. Partly because again when in our poll we were in the field right when the debate happened, and there was not a conversation in that moment about who might come out on the other end. And also, as far as I'm concerned right now, Joe Biden is actually still the nominee. So for the moment, we're still asking questions about him until that changes. Otherwise, we're engaging in a hypothetical that has not emerged. And I don't want to be a part of confusing voters any more than they already are.
Yeah. Thank you.
A question?
Do I get to ask another one?
Well, let's go to Rebecca.
You know, I got plenty of questions, man.
We know, Scott. We know. Rebecca, go ahead.
It's my turn now, Scott. So, Adrian, in 1984, the party elites understood that Ronald Reagan wasn't competent for a second term. However, Ronald Reagan was reelected, and we now know through history that Ronald Reagan largely did not run his second term. Someone else was in charge. So should we be asking voters, and particularly Black voters, whether or not Black voters feel or think that Joe Biden is competent to serve a second term?
Well, I mean, I think all those questions are completely legitimate to be asking voters. I think that, if there is a debate that is raging, right? And I don't think that we want to leave voters out of that debate. If there are questions that are being asked, then we should be asking everybody, right, who's going to be a part of the process to make this determination. So I think it's totally legitimate to be asking voters that right now. But I think that we have to accept their answers, right? Either way that they go. If Black voters say, yes, I think Joe Biden is old because y'all been telling us he's old for 2 years, and yeah, he's a little slow on the uptake, but I'm sticking with him, then that's what they're saying, right? If they say, yeah, no, I don't know, I was taken aback and I'm not sure if he should be the one, then we should take that into consideration as well. But I don't think that folks should be making assumptions about where people are and arriving at conclusions because we want voters to be someplace that they are not.
All right, now, Joy, do you have a question?
Yes. And the other question, I have for you is, I totally agree with you, Adrian. And the other question is, who are they going to vote for? Because people can think all kinds of things, but ultimately they're like, hey, this is who I'm still planning to vote for because the issues are beyond how I feel about him, how I feel about her, how I feel about, multiple people. And then the other question is, beyond Kamala Harris, who else do people have emerged as someone who they would want? Is there some name that's been floating out there that people are excited about? Because I'm going to be honest, I haven't heard it. I've only heard Joe Biden and I've only heard Kamala Harris, and I'm inclined to believe them.
We certainly haven't heard anyone raise any other potentials. And I also just think that, when we think about, if this is the work that you do, right, then you understand that there's a deep Democratic bench, right? And names have emerged and we've all seen them. I'm not sure that voters at large, and that includes Black voters, know much about any of these folks, right? And so when we talk about the time that we have to get to the convention, I'm not sure that there's time to actually inform, right? Like bring people along, about a candidate that they have never heard of or don't know much about. I think that the reality is that, to your first part of your question is that people know what's at stake. They understand the danger that we face as a country, as a nation, and as a community, right? People understand that, and they are going to mobilize around that point. I think we can't say enough that the threat is existential. It is a choice between an America that maintains a democracy, that gives us a fighting chance to have a more perfect union, right? That gives us a fighting chance to have a multiracial democracy that is grounded in justice, right? Like that gives us a chance at that. Or in America that literally crashes out and goes with dictatorship and authoritarianism. And I think that is the choice. And people understand that. And so when given that choice, I believe that not only us, right, not only our community, right, will do what needs to be done and show up in the way we need to show up. But I also think that, that ultimately Americans will as well, right? Like the clarity, is before us. And so I think that that's true. I worry about the conversation and the debate that's happening and the sort of chaos that it feels like is happening in the Democratic Party. I worry about it leading to a sense of defeatism, right? That it leads to, a sense among the base and among voters in general, the Democratic base and voters in general, that all is lost, right? That things cannot be done. And you see the chaos, and what does it even matter anymore? And so that's what I worry about, a prolonged fight, right, among the Democratic Party. And it's not just the Democratic Party, to be clear, right? There are folks who ain't never been a Democrat, right, who are in on this conversation, right? They want to say they don't have a vote, right, because they are not delegates, but they want something to say. And so my worry is that a prolonged internal fight actually begins to just depress the vote.
I think that's right. I want to get back in there too.
And on that point, we keep hearing this idea that there's 20-something% of black men that are going to vote for Trump, nearly double the number of black women that are saying in some polls say they're going to support Trump. Are you seeing that reflected in your polls? And then after, we're going to go back to Roland.
No, not at all. Not in any poll that we have ever done, not in any focus group that we have ever conducted, and not on the doors as we are talking to voters. It just, you know, people may say different things in polls, right, when people call them. But when you sample, when you're having conversations, you're doing polling with a large sample size of black voters, that doesn't emerge. We've seen the level of support for Trump be very consistent with the actual turnout support during elections, right? 16, 20, right, during the midterms for other Republicans. We see that level of support, remain consistent. It's under 10%. And so, 7, 8, 9% maybe, right? And so I think that we haven't seen it, again, not in our polls, not in our focus groups, and not as we're talking to voters at their doors in battleground states.
No, absolutely. We're going to throw it back to Roland and Dallas. Roland?
And that's one of the reasons why I want to make sure that we had you on here, Adrian. Look, mainstream media, they're not talking to y'all. Again, y'all are polling, a significant number of black people, way more than the rest of these polls. In fact, I was on Twitter earlier, and Matthew Dowd was quoting black people, how they feel about Biden, from the New York Times poll. And I said, Matthew, if you're going to quote black folks, quote the Black Pack poll. Don't sit here and quote the small sample in the New York Times poll. But again, that's the problem that we continue to face. Adrian, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Time to get paid, blow up like
Fanbase exclusive audio rooms are here. Now tap, talk, and get paid. Monetize your live podcast and most engaging conversations. You can now create exclusive audio chat rooms only for your subscribers and biggest fans. And as a user, subscribe, listen, and talk to your favorite creators. Now tap, talk, and get paid. Because everyone's a fan of something, and everyone has a fan base.
Despite numerous news articles, political pundits, and calls for Biden to end his re-election campaign, a new Northeastern University study finds that the president's June 27th debate performance has had almost no impact on the voters' preferences. 94% of those surveyed who had said before the debate that they were Biden supporters said they would continue to support the president. But just 86% of those who indicated support for Trump before the debate said they would continue to do so. Now, if you listen to that and then listen to all the rhetoric afterwards, you go, what the hell is going on? L. Joy Williams, of course, a longtime activist strategist, also a Sirius XM radio show host, joins us right now. And L. Joy, just what do you make of the insanity that you're seeing among Democrats trying to get Joe Biden out of the race? No plan B, nothing about Vice President Kamala Harris, and they are creating dissension in July when the election is less than 120 days away.
It's absolutely reprehensible to watch this unfold, because this is an issue of media making, right? Is that it's something for pundits and, cable news talking heads to continue the conversation on, instead of paying attention to the political landscape and what is happening around us, who is on the opposite side. And instead of focusing on that, they need something else to drum up viewership, right? Because if we could keep a speculation that there may be some drama at the convention, then that means more people will be tuned in and will watch our channels to see if there's drama at the convention. Our ad sales and all of that stuff will go up. That literally is what I believe this is all about, because it's not as if there's some huge mass of voters or of Democrats calling for Biden to step aside. Out of the 200 or something, the 300, both from the House, the Senate, and other leadership, I think with the last count was like 9 or 10. Right? And some of who are not even in a position on a federal level to make that decision. And so at this point, I believe that Biden is doing the right thing, which is I ran for the American people, and I'm going to continue to hear from and speak to the American people. And as you pointed out, you know, none of this is swaying people from supporting him. And, you know, the question I really have, besides they have no plan B and skipping over the vice president, is if we were actually in the streets doing the work that we need to be doing in order to win, then I would have maybe a little bit more sympathetic ear to people who are bringing up this concern. But we're not. Those donors that have the concern, how much are you investing in supporting the organizations that need that money now so that they can continue to be on the doors and on the phones and engaging people? That is the work that we need to do to win. And all of this conversation and talk and releasing statements and letters and everything, having serious concerns, take your serious concerns and get out in the street and actually do some work.
Christopher Boozy, Eljoy made a point there about infrastructure. Let's be clear. Right now, Biden-Harris has about 1,000 staffers, 100 field offices. If Joe Biden drops out and you don't pick Vice President Kamala Harris, you can't transfer those assets to other candidate. You can't transfer the money. So you have an infrastructure problem if you don't go with Vice President Harris. I don't understand how these people don't realize that.
Once again, it's insanity. Legally, you can't transfer the money because that money is for the Biden-Harris ticket. So legally, they can't. And as you pointed out, the infrastructure on the ground, if you replace both and you try to plop 2 new people in there, it's virtually impossible to be able to then set up a ground game and be competitive in November. And let's not forget who I don't know who this magic person or persons will be, but they're going to have to then introduce themselves to the American public. And just because someone may be popular in their state does not mean they're going to be popular nationally. I mean, we saw that with Ron DeSantis. You know, he was supposed to be the person to take on Trump, and that fizzled out pretty quickly. So, you know, I really honestly don't understand what these folks think they're going to be able to do in terms of pulling Biden out and putting somebody in. It doesn't work that way. And one other thing, Roland, that's that's been driving me also crazy about this whole thing. Let's pretend we could do this, right? Let's pretend that we could take, whoever and put them, and replace Biden and Harris. How are they going to get, that person or that ticket on every ballot? It's not going to happen. It's basically too late. And we talked about that, a bit earlier, but there will be legal changes, and more than likely, that candidate will not be on every ballot.
Eljoy, here's something else that I'm just sitting here like, I saw this story the other day. Here we go to my iPad. You got New York Democrats, your state. Oh my God, we might lose New York. What the hell? These blue states, are you trying to tell me that all of a sudden Donald Trump is going to win Minnesota? He's going to win New York State. He's going to win Illinois.
And if he does, it is because of a failure of leadership and work. The reason why we lost a congressional seat is a lack in the failure of the governor at that time to really invest in redistricting efforts. In order to do that resulted into us not counting enough people in order to keep our seats. Then fast forward, when we do get to the midterm election, it was the lack of investment in a coordinated strategy to protect and expand the congressional districts to make sure we retained what we had. So again, it is not because of one individual man at the top of the ticket. It is because of a lack of work. And that's what is really bothering me so much about this, as they are asking one man to step aside as if he is the only one that has to do the work in order to win in November. And that's not the case. If you're talking about winning to protect democracy, that is not an effort for one man. That is an effort for all of us to come together and do our respective part. And so Biden is doing his part, right, in carrying the banner. Harris is doing her part in carrying the banner for the party. And we need everybody else to do their part. And if you're a donor, invest now in the resources that people need in order to continue the work. If you're a talking head, you need to invest in talking up what we are voting for, not just what we are voting against. If you're an individual activist, you need to make sure that you are working within your sphere of influence to make sure that people understand the misinformation and the disinformation that's being sowed, that people understand what's at stake, and to understand what we will be able to do with a second term of a Biden-Harris administration. There's still voting rights on the line. There's still issues related to gun violence on the line. We are going to be able to do much more if we have a president like Biden and also Vice President Harris in the White House. We are able to do more when we are in control of Congress. And that is what people should be focused on, not one 90-minute debate.
Lauren, on that point there, I mean, you're seeing these blue you take New Hampshire, okay? So the folks in New Hampshire are still caught in their feelings because the primary was changed. Well, I'm sorry, you don't have the right to be first in the nation and say screw everybody else. Yeah. And so this is the childishness that we're seeing in the country right now.
Yeah, pretty much. How you doing, El Joy? I'm from New York. I was born in the Bronx. There's no way that the Republicans are going to win New York. That's not going to happen. It just shows you the mania that El Joy already pointed out in the media on this topic. There's just a lot of strange things going on. I think certainly the media is in a failed business model, as you had mentioned before, Roland. They want Donald Trump in there to make money. I don't care what anyone says. I'll never be able to prove it, but everything that they do is to get him into office, to drive excitement, to drive traffic to these websites, and to drive attention. And I cannot believe that it's just an amazing coincidence that they just happen to be doing everything under the sun, and particularly the New York Times and CNN, to drive excitement and controversy, and it just happens to all go in the direction of their bottom line in terms of web traffic. So, it's weird. It's a difficult situation, I think, for everybody, as we know, because in fact, it may in fact be true that the president does have a cognitive issue that does need to be dealt with and should be discussed. It could be true that the White House, the senior staff of the White House, was hiding that for a amount of time. Those things do need to be confronted. But at the same time, what we know is that there is only one person who's beaten Donald Trump, and that is Joe Biden. There is never a brokered convention in the history of American politics that has led to a win for that party. And the last two times that this happened, where the incumbent president left, which of course was Truman and LBJ, that led to a Republican coming in, Dwight Eisenhower and Richard Nixon. There's no history for this succeeding. So this is an interesting moment for the Democratic Party, and I do think it reflects an inability to turn the page to the next generation And that next generation is extremely diverse and in a lot of cases, extremely black. We'll see what happens.
Joy, here's also where I am a little confused when again, looking at all of this. So you've got folks saying, oh, in these swing districts, he's dragging people down. In the New York suburban districts, isn't it the job of the congressional candidate to be making the case to their voters?
This is why I say this is people being lazy. This is people wanting to rely just on the top of the ticket in order to drive turnout. And those of us who actually do elections, who actually work in the streets, who actually do campaign, I think Simone Sanders said that before, it's not just the ticket that drives people to turn out. And in fact, I think I talked about this in some of the tweets I highlighted. The other side, Trump has a ceiling. Right? There is only so many people that the Republicans can persuade. They have their base, and there's only a small amount of persuadable voters that they can persuade. While our ceiling is high. All we have to do is go out and engage with people and talk to them about not only what's at stake, but what we can do. It's important that next piece is added, because we can't just do the fear of, Project 2025, which is important and it should be part of our, messaging. But we also have to talk about what we can do. And our ceiling is much higher. We're persuade so many more, not only to vote for the ticket, but also to turn out in general. And for a lot of these races that you are mentioning in swing states and swing districts, it's that 2-3% of people who are infrequent voters. That's all we need to do. And so we have too much work to do for us to be, I don't want to be, Roland, as much as I love being on your show, I don't want to be on here talking about this. I want to be talking about how are we engaging people? What is the messaging that is working to turn out those in that 25 to 45 band? What is working to engage young people? That's what I want to be talking about right now. I don't want to be talking about this.
For this news conference, President Joe Biden, it was originally scheduled for 5:30. Was pushed back to 6:30. It's almost 7:30 and still hasn't started yet. Greg Carr, I want to go to you because as I'm looking at, again, this whole landscape, I always talk about I hate process journalism. And if you're Democrats and you're not talking about great economic numbers, you're not talking about inflation going down. You're not talking about the fact that President Biden in another month will under his term will have created more jobs than Reagan did in 8 years. So you got Democrats who keep going on television, targeting him and not telling a great story. Democrats can't blame that on anybody else but themselves.
Time to get paid, blow up like
Fan base exclusive audio rooms are here. Now tap, talk, and get paid. Monetize your live podcast and most engaging conversations. You can now create exclusive audio chat rooms only for your subscribers and biggest fans. And as a user, subscribe, listen, and talk to your favorite creators. Now tap, talk, and get paid. Because everyone's a fan of something, and everyone has a fan base.
So far, about 20 Democrats have publicly called on President Biden to withdraw from the presidential race. A couple will say he should resign the presidency. Well, the folks at Black Voters Matter released their own statement calling such a decision reckless and short-sighted to change the nominee this late in the process. Joining us right now is a co-founder of Black Voters Matter, Cliff Albright. And Cliff, every time I saw one of these people put this thing out, I would go, okay, who's your pick? Then I would go, okay, if it's not Harris, how are you going to get around the money issue? How are you going to get around the fact that you can't transfer 1,000 staffers and 100 field offices? How are you going to get around trying to build a national campaign on the fly? None of these people could answer any of those questions. That's why this was stupid.
Yeah, and I think that what you're raising, the question that you raised in terms of like who else would you be picking, I think really shows the problem. There's a meme going around on social media talking about, the real problem with Biden's age is really Kamala Harris's race and gender. And that's really what's driving a lot of this, is that you've got some elected officials, some donors, definitely the media, it's not enough of an answer for you to say, well, if something were to happen to Joe Biden, heaven forbid, but if something did, obviously you got a vice president that's gonna fill in. That's what it is that they don't want to see happen. And that's why you see, or that's part of the reason why you see, these calls for him to drop out. Yes, we know that the debate was terrible. Yes, we know that he was old. As Professor Malveaux says, black folk knew that 4 years ago. Like nobody black watched that debate and came out of the debate, wringing hands and gnashing teeth, say, oh my God, I didn't know Joe Biden was old. We knew that already. That was already baked in. But what we recognized 4 years ago, just as what we recognize now, is this is the best chance of beating Trump, and part of that is because of our distrust of the way that other white folks might vote. But what you're raising is really, it's a big part of the issue, which is that there's no process for how they would go about doing this. And we've argued that any process that would pass over the vice president would be detrimental to the base. You'll immediately lose a whole bunch of black women and black men that will see that level of disrespect. We, in our statement, what we said is that we want to see the process be respected. It's not coincidental in our minds that you have this call for the first time in decades. You have this call to ignore the primary results in the very first year when that primary was led by a southern state with a large number of black voters. So the primary system was changed in order to put South Carolina first. And then you put the year when South Carolina and black voters were put first to say, oh, we want to just ignore that there was a primary process. And then 14 million folks, a large number of which are black, voted for President Biden. So as you've said several times, it doesn't make, especially, I don't know about you, Roland, but anytime I see the level of coordination and collusion, like what we saw over those 2 or 3 weeks of the elected officials, the media, the billionaires and celebrities, all of the moneyed interests coming after Joe Biden, real and arguably, coming after him in a way, back in the day where they would say, you an N-word lover, right? I think part of the anger that he's been getting has been because of having a first black woman vice president, because of putting a first black woman on the Supreme Court, because of putting an historic number of judges within the judicial system. And we got another reminder today in the form of Judge Cannon about why it's important that you're able to put these judges in these positions. And so, when you see that level of collusion coming from the media and ignoring the polling, which I'm not a big fan of polling, like the same people that are talking about these polls now are the same polls that were telling us that there was a red wave coming in 2022, and we see where that wound up. So I'm not a big fan, except for a couple of people that I trust. But when you look at the polling that's come out over the past couple of days, with Biden either maintaining where he was, or in some cases, like with the Marist NPR poll, where he's developed a 2-point lead, and there's some other polls showing that he's developed the lead. When you see that happen after 2 weeks of just being pummeled by, his own party and by the media, when you see that, you got to wonder, what would the polls look like if for 2 or 3 weeks, instead of focusing on Biden and a debate, they were instead focusing on Project 2025, if they were focusing on Trump and the Epstein files, if they were focusing on these court cases, then what would the polling look like? But instead, we saw the opposite take place. So it's really amazing that he's still at where he's at in those polls.
Example here, Nancy, this Politico reported, I'll go to my iPad, Nancy Pelosi thinks Biden will lose, and she was working the phones to replace him. I was told point blank that Nancy Pelosi was not in support of Vice President Kamala Harris replacing Biden. So then you got to ask, well, who the hell were you going to get? And again, history shows you the 2 times Democrats replaced their nominee, they lost.
Right. Yeah, I mean, when you look at the Democrats in contested conventions, 1968, of all places, Chicago. When you look at the 1980 race and, Kennedy challenging Carter and what took place there. And then even as recently as 2016, which was somewhat of a contested debate, contested convention, those don't end well. They just don't end well. And this year, I think especially would be chaotic, and I really think would create a process where you'd see a lot of Black voters feeling like our voices were just ignored in favor of, again, the big money donors and celebrities, and in terms of the media, the corporate media interest. And so I don't see that process ending well. And I've got to add on that, look, there are people within our movement, people very close to me, me, myself, who have legit concerns on policy matters in regards to President Biden, and one policy matter in particular in terms of Gaza. There's a debate that could be had there, right? Like people that favor human rights and all of that. We can have that debate and work out and discuss what would be better, on that issue. What would be better for Palestinians? Would it be Joe Biden, or would it be Trump, who we all know wants to expel Muslims and expel protesters and give Netanyahu a blank check to do whatever the heck he wants to do in Israel? But that can be a discussion. That's different from this discussion that we've seen in the media over the past 2 weeks, which has been focused on just his age, on just the debate, on just the polling. Oh, Lord. I hope I'm still there. But
you're here. You're here.
That's a different kind of debate. So it's fair game to talk about like real policies. What do we want more? What is the agenda? What was done well? What wasn't done well? Like all that's fair game, right? But this thing that we've been seeing play out in the media, that's been something that we all should be very concerned about, because, again, a lot of it is driven by, again, not just President Biden's age, but the nature of VP Harris as the vice president.
Cliff, y'all are out there. You're going door to door. We had Adrienne Shropshire of Black Pac, and she talked about what they are hearing from folks door to door. And what she said is, and it looks, y'all are a nonpartisan organization, but the reality is, she said that they are seeing, as days progress, Black voters are going, hey, I'm not jumping up and down about Biden, but I do know there's a binary choice. And folks are making that choice. And I just simply believe one of the reasons you see these polling numbers the way they are is because, one, they're underpolling Black people, but also you're seeing that Black number go up as you go week by week. So it's sort of ludicrous to make an assessment saying, oh, they're guaranteed to lose based on what you see in July as opposed to what it's going to look like in October.
No, and that's actually the same thing that I've been saying, that our organization's been saying, to the media ever since January, or even going back to 23, where people were talking to us about the polling and what are Black folks going to do and why is enthusiasm slow and all of that. And we've been saying for the past year now, wait a minute, right? You can't judge anything a year out from the election. As we get closer, as there's more discussions, as people become more and more clear that this is a binary choice for the most part, right? Because I think for a lot of the year, I think there were some of us that still weren't quite believing that the twice impeached, felony convictions, forward trial, all of that stuff, rapists, some of us weren't really believing that this dude is going to come back and be the nominee. But as we get closer, and again, we've been saying this for a year, that as we get closer to the election, as the reality sets in that this is not a referendum on Biden, that this is a choice between two candidates, as the issues start getting more attention and more discussion, you got people now paying attention to the nature of the economy and what Black unemployment has been, and it's not as low as what we want it to be ever, right? It's always twice of whatever white unemployment is, but the reality is that under this administration, we've had the lowest unemployment unemployment ever in history. So that as we get closer to the election and we start getting more information about the reality of the economy, the realities around, around what this administration, particularly the Department of Justice, has done on police accountability and holding some of these police departments accountable, that the more and more that some of the good story gets out there, and again, it's not a perfect story, but there's a story there to be told. And we've been saying that the more and more that we have these conversations, the more and more that Black media gets resources to put information out there, the more and more that groups like ours and all the others in this ecosystem are able to knock on those doors and make those phone calls and send those text messages, the more that our folks get good information from legit conversations, that the more that you would start to see those polling numbers change. And that's exactly what it is that we've been seeing. This ain't rocket science, y'all. But when you got a bunch of people out there that at the end of the day, and I've said this repeatedly for years, that you've got some Democrats, traditional moderates, whatever you want to call them, establishment, who would rather lose elections than to give way to a progressive Black and brown base, to give way to progressive policies, right? To give way to a president that would pick a Black woman to be his vice president, that there are some Democrats that would rather lose elections. And some of these quotes that we're now seeing coming out in the media are basically saying that, where they're saying, you know what, we're just resolved that we're just going to have another Trump presidency. The only way that you're resolved with that is if you really don't mind that happening. And you've got some people within the establishment that's that position, that they're okay with that happening, because at the end of the day, they don't have as much to lose as what our communities have. George Clooney and them, they don't have as much to lose as what our communities have stake. This isn't a game for us, right? These are our lives. When you look at Project 2025, it's the most marginalized communities, Black folks, brown folks, indigenous folks, women that are going to be feeling the brunt of 2025. You got this dude that he just announced for his vice president who is out there talking about women should stay in even abusive, violent marriages, right? Because they want to get rid of no fault. Not only do they want to get rid of no fault divorce, they don't even want you to be able to get a divorce, even if you're getting abused. This is not a game, right? And there are some people whose lives are going to be more greatly impacted than others. And those are the folks that, to a large extent, in our communities and our conversations, that are saying, stay the course, whereas some of the other folks that got that luxury, that have that privilege, they want to play games around having some lottery system to pick the nominee.
Last question I have for you before I go to my panel with questions. I believe this 100%. I want to get your take. Do you believe that Project 2025 is going to play a crucial role in driving Black, Latino, and young turnout?
Yes. I think the more that we have these conversations, the more that people learn. And shout out to Taraji P. Henson, who did more in 30 seconds at the BET Awards to raise the profile of Project 2025 than most media had done. And shout out to Simone Sanders, who on her show, she had the dude at the Heritage Foundation, who came on, and, some people were critical because we say, well, why do you give them a microphone, right? And sometimes you give them the microphone so that they can expose themselves. And so Simone Sanders on her show was able to do that. That's where the president of Heritage, which for those who don't know, Heritage Foundation is the group that's behind Project 2025. Also, a group which was founded, as they speak about heritage, they were founded and in the early years put a lot of attention, and still to this day, to reinforcing school segregation and trying to fight against integration. That's the same Heritage Foundation that's behind this Project 2025. But I think that the more that people learn about it and talk about it and talk about all the different ways that they're trying to take over government and get rid of voting rights and send women back and we're going to be doing a series of one-pagers talking about the things that are specifically targeted against Black folks. Things like continuing the attacks on affirmative action and DEI. In fact, they want to take the Department of Justice and Office of Civil Rights, and instead of it being to enforce, the Civil Rights Act, they want to twist it around to say that civil rights moving forward is going to be investigations of anti-white discrimination. That's what this Department of Justice would become. And so any advances that we've made in terms of civil rights and having the Department of Justice enforce that and implement that would literally be turned around, where they would now be criminalizing, investigating any efforts to deal with racial justice. That's part of what's at stake. Environmental protections. They want to get rid of the whole office whose sole job is to deal with environmental racism, right? Think about Flint, think about Jackson's water, think about environmental catastrophes and the impacts of climate change and flooding in our communities. They want to get rid of that office, right? They want to get rid of anything that tracks racial conditions, right? Because you can't make a claim that Black folks are facing inequities if you're not even tracking the inequities. They want to get rid of all of that. So there's several pieces of this 900-page document that specifically target Black folks. And the more and more that we have those conversations, then we believe the more and more that to your point, Roland, that Project 2025 trumps Project 2025, because we got to make it clear. This is Trump's, and Professor Malveaux was just talking about this. This is Trump's Project 2025. These are his people. These are his former administration, his former advisors, and not just former, but these are people that he is saying that he's going to be bringing back if he were able to get back in. So this is Trump's Project 2025, and we got to remind people of that every opportunity that we get, because it's not a game. And I argue that this part of what this so-called shooting, and that's a whole nother discussion, but part of this, and Black Twitter is going to get to the bottom of it, trust me, but part of what's behind this so-called shooting is that it has changed the conversation, where increasingly people are talking about Project 2025 online. Even some of the media was being pushed into it. And just like that, the narrative has been changed, so that now all they're talking about is the so-called shooting that took place. And so we have to stay focused. We can't wind up chasing all these other things. We've got to stay focused on talking about Trump's Project 2025, talking about what's at risk, and keeping our eyes on the prize.
Lauren, your question.
Cliff, good seeing you. We just had a primary, as you know, on June 18 in Virginia, and talking to people who've been knocking doors, they say the issue that keeps coming up at the doors is the economy, the economy, the economy. I wanted to hear from you. Do you think abortion is a big issue for Black voters in the same way it is for white voters? Or is it just the issue that the Democrats want to talk about because they're getting millions and millions of dollars from Planned Parenthood? What do you think about that? Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually think that it is a big issue in our communities, and for a couple of reasons. And you could look at Ohio and look at the turnout that you saw in Ohio when they had that referendum on abortion rights. Black folks came out in large numbers. I even saw a poll that said that Black men actually voted for the referendum even at an even higher rate than Black women. I'm kind of skeptical of that, but there's some evidence that that it's not even just a Black woman's issue, that Black men, and I think some of the conversations that I've had lots of conversations with brothers that were like, yeah, we got to do something about this. And so I do think that it's a big issue. And part of the reason it's a big issue in our community is because it's a combination of several things, right? It's a combination of the health, it's a combination of the choice issue, like in and of itself, right? It's also a healthcare issue. We know the impact of reproductive justice in terms of like maternal mortality, right? And so for us, it's a health issue. It's also an economic issue. It's not separate from those economic issues that people are very much concerned about. Whether or not you have a child is in part an economic issue. There are certainly economic implications to it. And so for us, and it's a criminal justice issue, because Lord knows that if they start criminalizing, having abortions or trying to travel across lines to do so, who's going to get profiled the most when they're on the highways traveling to do that? And so for us, it's a combination of issues. It's not a standalone issue in and of itself. And that's what we hear a lot when we talk about that issue. But they view it as a wedge issue, because you still do have some segments of our community, the deeply religious community that for them that can be a wedge issue. But I think to a large extent, I'm not saying it's more important than the economic, because again, I think that there's connections between them. But I do think that it's a legit issue that our folks in our community are talking about.
I will say this here: when they had the Ohio referendum, black men voted in significant numbers for that referendum in Ohio. Julian.
First of all, thank you all for the work you do at Black Voters Matter. It's such an important organization, and it's really, really, really important. But everybody's talking about polling. Roland mentioned undersampling, the way that African Americans are undersampled. The other statistical issue is not only the undersampling, but the size of the samples. So we're talking about a poll that has 1,200 people in it and maybe 100 Black people. Well, margin of error there is all over the place. Why aren't people talking more about some of these statistical errors as they talk about the flaws in these polls?
Yeah, you know, somebody famous once said, figures don't lie, but liars do figure, right? I've taken enough stats classes in my life to know that you can create a sample and sample size and all that to say just about whatever you want to say. But you're exactly right. You know, that New York Times Siena poll that a couple of months ago made a big splash. It was one of the biggest ones that was talking about, you know, Black voters, and I think it was like the 5 or 6 swing states that they were looking at and saying it was like 20%. But if you got into the details of that poll had about 400 and something Black folks, right? But again, this was across 6 or 7 different swing states. And so essentially what you were looking at was a national story that was really based on like 60 or 70 Black folks in each one of those states. And so you're right, the sample sizes in some of these, especially when you're talking about Black folks. But I think to answer your question, a lot of people don't dig into that level of detail. A lot of people don't dig into the methodology of these polls. They don't dig into the sample sizes. They don't dig into you know, the crosstabs and the different relationships between age and race and all of that. And so we're just left with what? We're left with the headlines that whatever media, mainstream media, decides to focus on when they're reporting on that. That's why it's important for us to be able to do our own polling, you know, and shout out to, you know, Cornell Belcher and Adrian and work that Black Pac's been doing on doing a series of polls and focus groups, because they really were some of the first to be able to point out that, you know, that there's a whole segment of our community that is thinking differently than what you would have the mainstream media would have us believe. And so we've got to be able to study these polls a lot more closely and to be able to do our own polling.
Thank you so much for all of your work, and it's so appreciated and needed. There have been so many things that have been in the news, from abortion to the assassination attempt to all of these different conversations that are necessary to have. But I feel like one thing that has slipped off the radar is conversations about voter suppression. Can you give us your latest information and news you have about voter suppression efforts that you're seeing going on across the country?
Yeah, I'm so glad you raised that, because it's been one of my biggest frustrations. And I say it to every journalist that tries to talk to us about these polls and about Black enthusiasm. And I make this point: Black turnout is not just a function of Black enthusiasm. Right. Black turnout is not just a function of Black enthusiasm. It's also a function of to what extent we have the right and we have the access and the ability to cast our vote. Right. When we weren't voting in the South, you know, throughout Jim Crow, it wasn't because we weren't enthusiastic. Right. If enthusiasm was the only thing that mattered, that we would have been voting in big numbers, you know, throughout the entire 20th century. But we weren't. And why? Because we were in the midst of Jim Crow, and there wasn't the legal framework that would let us act on our enthusiasm, act on our hopes and dreams for how we could control our lives. So Black voting has never just been a function of how motivated or how enthusiastic we is. It's also always a function of voter suppression. And that's exactly what we're seeing and what we're very concerned about going into this election cycle. We know that the Republican Party has a strategy of recruiting thousands, I think like 10,000 of these poll watchers that they want to recruit. And in some of these states, those poll watchers have the ability, not just theoretically, like we've seen this happen in states so far. We saw it happen in North Carolina, where they go into these polling places and they are intrusive, right? They get in the way of the poll workers, the poll clerks being able to do their jobs. They get in the way sometimes of voters being able to vote, and they wind up intimidating voters. And so, excuse me, I think I got whatever Roland got. And so what we've seen happening is that voter suppression continues to be a major problem, and especially in some of these battleground states, in Georgia, in North Carolina, even in states that should be more of a battleground, but part of the reason that they're not is because of the voter suppression. Florida should be a lot more competitive than it is. People look at why did the last Florida election go the way that it went, and they think it's just because Rick DeSantis was possible. No, it's also because Florida passed one of the worst voter suppression laws in the country. And so to answer your question, some of the things that we're seeing are, attacks on every phase of the process. They've made it more difficult to vote by mail. They've attacked drop boxes. They're still reducing the number of polling places. Of course, we know what they do with the photo ID, both for in-person as well as when absentee voting. And the thing that we've been saying for years, and we have got to keep an eye on this, y'all. The thing that we've been saying for years now, one of the most insidious pieces has been the way that they've, in some of these laws, in some of these states, they've made it possible to take over local county boards of elections, to take over that process, to have board members be able to be replaced by the state legislatures, right? Or for have the state legislatures. In some cases, they've taken away the power of the Secretary of State. I think Arizona might be an example of this, where they've taken away powers from the Secretary of State and put it more in the hands of the legislature. And so these different mechanisms that they're using, not just to suppress the vote, but also to control the count. That is something that we have got to keep a very close eye on throughout this election cycle.
Time to get paid, blow up like.
Fan base exclusive audio rooms are here. Now tap, talk, and get paid. Monetize your live podcast and most engaging conversations. You can now create exclusive audio chat rooms only for your subscribers and biggest fans. And as a user, subscribe, listen, and talk to your favorite creators. Now tap, talk, and get paid. Because everyone's a fan of something, and everyone has a fan base.
And if you don't know,
you've got a letter that some Democrats are sending saying, stop this, don't do this roll call, it's not right. But again, what you hear from the DNC chair, Harrison, he's saying we cannot chance this by waiting for the courts. In fact, what he lays out, and again, he went back in his lengthy back and forth on social media with Nate Silver. And this is what Harrison said, because Silver called it a technicality. Go to my iPad. Harrison said, for the last few cycles, it has always been a technicality for Ohio and other states to give a waiver to the RNC and the DNC for their convention certifications. He said, for the first time ever, Ohio didn't do so. He said the DNC acted in our own best interest in May and decided to move forward with the virtual vote. The governor called a special session to address the situation. However, the Ohio GOP decided to play games, refused to pass a clean fix, and passed a bill that included a poison pill for Ohio legislative Democrats. Furthermore, they passed the bill as a non-emergency bill, which meant we have to wait 90 days for enactment, meaning the bill is not enacted until September after the original August 7th deadline. So we're supposed to rely upon the goodwill of those same people. Please don't gaslight me. He also said that he laid out in terms of the Rules Committee what they should be doing. Jamie Harrison is right. The last thing you want to do is throw this thing to the courts. And Nate Silver is even more pathetic because he actually said this here. Nor is Ohio a swing state. If Biden's name is on the ballot in Ohio and Kamala Harris in the other 49 states, it wouldn't affect his odds of winning the Electoral College one bit. The job of the DNC chair is to have his candidate on all 50 ballots. Nate Silver should shut the hell up. You on mute.
Sorry about that. I said Nate Silver has been a problem for a while. Nate Silver is one of these people who's very technically astute, but doesn't really care much, I would say, for the politics of everyday people and the lives that they have to live. And the fact of the matter is, if we have a state that can simply take someone off the ballot, this is going to be a problem for the citizens of that state. It's essentially taking away their right to vote. And if you don't think that's a problem because of what statistics tell you, then I think you need to go back and really figure out what this is about to you. I think a lot of people approach political science and politics as it's just a matter of crunching numbers, but this is real people's lives. And so whether it affects the statistical outcome or not, it doesn't really matter. What matters is the rule of law. What matters is the principle of elections and what they're supposed to be for. So if it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter to Nate Silver because his life functionally won't change because of this. It matters to the people of Ohio, however, in particular the Black folks and the Latin folks in Ohio who essentially won't get a vote that day. So this is, I think, again, politics run amok. And part of the reason why people are so confused about what to do, because they get mixed messages like this. And when you start talking about what is statistically anomalous and telling people it essentially doesn't matter, they shouldn't care, then why would anybody show up?
I mean, what's crazy here, Larry, you don't chance anything. You don't say, well, you know what? We could just, it's a weak case. We have seen weak cases where the Republican judges just took it to the hilt.
Yeah, so Roland, my colleague just made a great point. Another point, I feel like I'm reminded of Eddie Murphy who said, don't fall off a banana and tailpipe. Listen, the Republicans have been tell us who they are for the last several years. And what's happened in Ohio has been going on for the last couple of months. So the chair is right. If you sit around and wait, who knows what's going to happen? You certainly, like I said, if this goes to the courts, you already see the kind of games they're playing. The other thing, Roland, about this issue, particularly about what's happening in Ohio, is this is a snapshot of what a Trump administration will be like if he gets elected. He wins in November and they get sworn in January. And I don't think people are paying close enough attention between the rhetoric about him talking about being a dictator and then the games that are being played by Republicans in the state of Ohio. They're directly connected. They're telling you now what it's going to be like under a Trump administration. And so it's going to be really important for, like I said, folks to go out and vote. The other thing is Nate is a data scientist. And so being a data scientist does not mean you are have enough background about politics to understand certainly the legal system. And then secondly, understand that many of the games that are played by state and local party leaders, particularly like the GOP. So I think his opinion doesn't really matter. And the other thing is, Roland, listen, once again, this is going to be like what it's going to be like living in the United States in a couple of months if people don't get out to vote. And so I know we're going to talk later about President Biden being at the NAACP convention, but it is really important, not only for Black folks and Latin folks in Ohio, but the states across the country to understand that this is the last line of defense to deal with these issues, because if not, you'll be dealing with this for years in the future. And then your grandchildren and children would ask you why. Where were you at and why didn't you do something?
The thing here, Mustafa, that is clear is when you have, first of all, Nate Silver, are you a reporter? Or like, what the hell are you? Who the hell are you to tell the DNC chair in a back and forth that he's gaslighting and they should not be doing something that they have the right to do?
Well, Nate Silver has got that TV bug, right? If you have watched his evolution, then you've seen how when you say controversial things that you get more airtime. So I'm not taking anything away from him as a tactician, a statistician, any of the things that are in his technical wheelhouse. But we also understand how being on mainstream media works. So we have to ask the question, is this a part of his calculus as someone who deals with numbers of being able to have more time there? Besides that, the real question is, are people going to continue to be fooled because we continue to allow ourselves to say this could never happen, and then just walking down like we're walking down a dark alleyway after somebody done punched you in the head one time and saying, well, there's no way somebody gonna punch me again. With all the Supreme Court cases that we said could never possibly turn out the way that they did, and as devastating as they have. People saying, well, when they first heard about Project 2025, well, this couldn't possibly be as bad as folks on the Black Star Network have shared, or other folks. So I'm just wondering when folks are actually going to wake up and understand that there is a strategic set of actions that are being put in place. And with those strategic sets of action, there are also traps that they're hoping that you will step into, with the idea that this couldn't possibly happen. I couldn't possibly get caught in this bog, if you will, that would slow a process down, stop someone from being able to vote. So we just need to kind of wake up and understand that folks have actually thought this stuff through, and there is real intentionality in the things that we're dealing with in this moment.
Time to get paid, blow up like
Fanbase exclusive audio rooms are here. Now tap, talk, and get paid. Monetize your live podcast and most engaging conversations. You can now create exclusive audio chat rooms only for your subscribers and biggest fans. And as a user, subscribe, listen, and talk to your favorite creators. Now tap, talk, and get paid. Because everyone's a fan of something, and everyone has a fan base.
Ohio Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, former chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. Congresswoman, always glad to have you here. Congresswoman, listen, my parents have worked political campaigns. They've run phone banks. They put up yard signs. They hung door knockers. Yeah. They've been poll workers. I have been in and around politics, passing stuff out on election day, you name it, all that stuff, since I can remember, since I was 6, 7 years old. I have never in my life seen a party viciously attack it's the top of the ticket, an incumbent president with an unbelievable record like what we are witnessing right now by a handful of Democrats in the House, but a bunch of donors and other so-called elite Dems.
Roland, I'm right with you. And like you, most of my life I've been dealing with politics, whether it was an elected official, whether it was putting yard signs up, being part of the strategy team. And that's why the Congressional Black Caucus, I'm so proud. We have been standing strong, and to quote Jim Clyburn, we're riding with Biden. And you hit the nail on the head. I cannot imagine why we have an internal fight with Democrats. And no one's given any options. They're saying, we don't want to change the rules of the DNC. We want to create our own rules and have a brokered convention, let people submit nominations. When we have a president that has delivered more than any of our past presidents, especially when you talk about healthcare and education and you talk about Black Americans. What happened to us riding the tide with our president who has delivered? Just today, the stock market is up 700 points. When you think about the polling earlier on your show, people were pointing it out that he is on the uptick with this. And you're going to take a 90-minute speech and start unraveling this close to the election and the convention. It does not make sense. And we have to hold our grounds and fight for Joe Biden because he's been fighting for our democracy. And here's the thing, we're misguided because the enemy is Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. I'm from Ohio. J.D. Vance is bad for Ohio, and he is certainly bad for America. And we should not be sidetracked and distracted when we have someone that's going to be a dictator, someone who is saying if he is elected on day one, he's going for retribution and revenge. He has openly said he could stand on Fifth Avenue and kill somebody or shoot someone, and nothing could be done. 34 counts he's been indicted on. I mean, come on. I mean, you think of something that's negative, and that's Donald Trump. Donald Trump.
So, and again, for the people out there watching and listening, the Congressional Black Caucus has been under intense pressure to break.
Yes.
I know, I've been talking to many CBC members. Donors have been calling y'all.
Yes.
They have been trying to get y'all to break.
Yes.
Other Democrats have been they've been trying to pick off different CBC members because the CBC is the largest caucus, the Democratic side. They know if they are able to put cracks and break the CBC, the doors blow wide open.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But let me just tell you, and you are right, there are people putting proposals out there, floating names of people that maybe we're supposed to be impressed with. But let me just tell you, I've never been more proud of our leadership. Stephen Horsford has been traveling the United States. I've been with him most days. Jim Clyburn, as we all know, spends a lot of time with President Biden. And here's the thing. We have so much at stake, our democracy, our freedoms, and we could also, in our lifetime, Roland, have a Black man, Hakeem Jeffries, to be the Speaker of the House, the third most powerful person in this country. And we are just months away from that.
So I got to ask you, and again, I've been sitting here and watching all these moves, these machinations. And it's real interesting. And I love it how they keep saying, oh, we need a fresh, vibrant, new voice.
Yes.
And I'm telling you, here's the deal. Biden told some of these people he would not drop Kamala.
That's right. That's right.
So he's her greatest cover. She serves at the pleasure of the president. So their deal is, well, damn, we can't take her out. But if we take him out, then we can take her out, and then we can run Gavin or Gretchen or Josh. That's what's going on here. This is all a ploy to take out Kamala Harris. It's not solely about Biden. They want to take both of them out.
Roland, you are so on point as usual. And I said to a group of folks the other day, okay, you want change. They quoted, his 90-minute speech, and we don't think that he'll make it. He can't do it. And I said, but we have an amazing vice president. She has been tried and tested. She ran for president. She has been elected in California, served as a first Black woman. So the pressure has been on her, and she is the vice president. Not one of them said, we don't want Biden because we have Kamala Harris. And let me just tell you, from this Black woman, they will not attack my president and jump over Kamala Harris. We will not stand for that because we stand with our vice president. As she has said, she is running with Joe Biden because you're right. They don't want her either.
See, I mean, and I keep telling people, y'all, the coup d'etat is sitting right in front of you.
That's right.
It's sitting right in front of you. And what's amazing to me, and you don't have to say it, I'm going to say it again. Nancy Pelosi is not standing with Kamala Harris. I don't know what Barack Obama doing, but all this other little stuff, and I said it, this is the time that Barack Obama should come out and stand with his vice president and say to the party, enough of this. This is where Obama should be the leader and say, listen, the man has said he's running. I saw an interview. Cory Booker was on CNN. He's like, I trust Joe is going to make the decision. I'm like, he already made it. I mean,
he said,
how many more times did the man can say it?
He said on national TV, he has said to me in person, in the last 30 days, I have been with him. I have traveled with him. I am going to Milwaukee tonight to be there tomorrow to do some counter. And I am telling you, Joe Biden has said, I am running. I am not getting out of this race. And once he said that, stock market went up. His points went up after every speech that he gave after the debate.
It is. I mean, I just sit here and it's like the man said, I'm running. And he said, unless the Lord tells me, or
if the Lord comes down here and tells me, that's the only thing he would consider. But here's the thing, Roland. None of these folks are saying, here's who we want out loud.
Not one. Not
out
one.
Loud. No plain.
Because they don't want Kamala Harris.
And they don't want to say it. They tried to get to the Congressional Black Caucus. That plan didn't work. Then they tried to use Ohio because we had some drama with getting Joe Biden on Ohio's ballot. So then when we worked that out, because the DNC could have a rules committee, work with the rules so we could do it virtual, then they didn't want that. So, but they don't have a plan. And as I have said to several people, you have to know the rules of engagement. There's not enough time to talk about, we're going to get someone vetted. We're going to train them. We're going to hold meetings and have people interview them. What planet are they on? And then what are they going to run on? When we talk about the economy, so they're going to run on Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's record. When we talk about health care and capping insulin for $35, they didn't do that. If they're going to go back and talk about the infrastructure, $1.2 trillion, well, I led that when I was chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. Jim Clyburn and Maxine Waters and all of us went to Nancy Pelosi and brokered a deal that the leadership couldn't broker. So what, they're going to run on that? I mean, I am so with you, and I am so pleased that you are speaking truth to power and that people are coming on your show, because we're not afraid. We have too much to lose with Donald Trump. We should not be fighting ourselves and fighting Joe Biden and Kamala Harris when J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, they are the enemy.
Right. I mean, I could only imagine if Democrats has spent the last 20 days completely focused on Trump and his lies. Yeah. I could only imagine if they spent their time talking about how nutso J.D. Vance is after he got named on Monday. But no, you've got Pelosi making her calls, Schiff talking, Carville, these podcasters, Axelrod, all these people. And history also shows the two times Democrats changed the nominee before the election, they lost.
Exactly.
To me, this ain't that hard.
Okay, so please.
It ain't that hard. Questions for Congresswoman Rebecca, you first.
Thank you, Congresswoman, so much for being here tonight. So my question for you is, what should Black communities do to make sure that their voices are heard in this process? Because even if everybody Black isn't registered Democrat and this isn't their party, that's okay. But this is still about who's going to be on everybody's ballot in November and whether or not there was a true and democratic process. So what is your message for Black communities as we're watching this play out?
Black communities should understand what's at stake. And a lot of people aren't engaged and they don't know the rules of engagement. But what I am saying, trust what we have had. We use that same process that gave us our first Black president. We use that same process that beat Donald Trump and gave us a Black vice president. So first, you must vote. You must use your voice and you must vote. And even if you say you're not into politics and you don't follow all this, think about what you have to lose. If you don't support this ticket, which is a tested ticket, Biden beat him before when people said he wouldn't beat him. He beat an incumbent president. Biden has a track record to run on, and he has done more for Black Americans. So this is our time to stand up. Use your voice. Don't let people convince you that someone is too old and he can't win. He was old when he won before. And Donald Trump is also young, is also old. It's not like he's young. He can't complete a sentence. He doesn't answer questions. So the same barometer that we are judging our president on, if we use that same thing, then Donald Trump should not be the candidate, because we know on Biden's worst day, he's better than the best day that Donald Trump could ever have. So you got to get engaged. You got to help people get energized. Don't be a part of the naysayers just because you're reading a statistic or a fact, or someone said, look how confused he was. He was sick. He admitted that he had not been feeling well. He was tired. I can tell you, you can take someone half his age, and if they are suffering with a cold, if they've just gotten off a flight from Europe, if they've been going day and day, they may slip up on a word or two.
Look, I was in Ethiopia. That smoke got in my system 2 weeks.
Exactly.
2 weeks ago today. Hell, my ass still sick, and I was feeling like crap. ABC is reporting that on Saturday, Senator Chuck Schumer told Biden in a meeting it would be better for the country if he ended his reelection bid. Now, that was July 13th. This is interesting because 4 days earlier, Chuck Schumer said this.
The president, his ability to serve for 2 more years, that there might be a challenge at the convention, and if there is there the ability to throw out the virtual nomination?
As I've said before, I'm with Joe. Yes.
So July 9th, he says, I'm with Joe. 4 days later, says something different. Hey, here's my whole deal. Senator Chuck Schumer, if you told Biden that privately, man up and tell everybody publicly.
Exactly. And that's what I want the American people to do. Follow the folks that speak truth to power. Follow the folks that aren't afraid to say who they're with or who they are against. And I don't care if it is a colleague of mine or not. If you want to say you don't want the president and you don't want the vice president, then let's hear who you have and tell me what they're going to run on.
Robert.
And thank you so much for joining us, Representative. I have this question that Joe Biden, as we saw this weekend in Las Vegas with NAACP, when things get tough, we saw this in 2020 in South Carolina, he runs back to the black community for support, and we are supporting him more than any other group. But what is going to be our demand in exchange for this support? Because when everyone else is gathering around, when the long knives are out, when we're beware the eyes of March territory, he tends to lean on our community. Are we going to be asking for an executive order on criminal justice reform that is more extensive than the previous orders? Are we going to be asking for an executive order on voting rights that will really ensure buttress much of the rights that we're having now? How can he pay back the community before the election, not simply saying wait till after I'm reelected?
You just hit the nail on the head. The same thing that we did before, and he kept every promise before he was elected. He said that he would put a black woman on the Supreme Court, and he did. He picked a black female to be his vice president. He put more black people in cabinet positions and other strategic positions than any other president. We went and we asked him to protect our communities, and let's do something with criminal justice. We have the most progressive gun legislation than we've ever had. We talked about protecting our seniors, especially black seniors who we know suffer with diabetes and couldn't afford their insulin. Put a cap on it for $35 and then cap their medical expenses at $2,000, and it's created more than 15 million jobs. I'm right here in Ohio. He was ride or die with the late Eddie Bernice Johnson when we needed to get the CHIP Act passed, which created jobs. Right here in Ohio, we received $26 million right here in Ohio. And so I'm just telling you, he has kept his word. And yes, we meet with him, the Congressional Black Caucus. We've outlined a plan. We've worked with the Big Eight, I call it, our civil rights organizations. And we have put all of our issues out there. And I fully trust the Biden-Harris administration that they would follow through as they did before, and we were very victorious.
Scott?
Good evening, Congresswoman. Okay, I agree with you and the panelists about what a great president Biden has been. I write a lot of checks to the DNC and to federal and local DNC officials and to even Biden-Harris. So here's my question. If all of that's true about Joe Biden, I agree that it is, then why is he running behind Donald Trump, who's a convicted felon, been found liable for sexual abuse and for financial fraud? I mean, on paper, it shouldn't even be close. And so I agree the elites are trying to push him out, but for that bad performance and but for him running behind in the polls, can't ignore that. You know, in campaigns, all you got to get is one more vote to the next guy. So why is he losing this race less than 4 months out from the election?
Well, I know we've seen what the polls have said, and I know he's been behind and within the margin. And lots of polls. Lots of polls had me down 18 points and said that I would never go to Congress and be there. And those folks that asked that same question and said, why is she behind? Well, when we got closer to the election, obviously the polls were wrong and I prevailed. Joe Biden has been down in the polls before, so has other presidents at this very same time and won. Are we concerned? I don't want to sound naive. Absolutely. But it is more than the polls. If people get out to vote, if people get excited and energized that we also have a Black woman running on that ticket, I believe that he will be successful. I can't address why the polls say that. I can't address every poll. I think we are taking it into consideration. But here's the other thing. We polled some of those same other names to run against Donald Trump, and none of them did as well as Joe Biden. So you may have a good point. He should be higher in the polls because we know what he's running against: a felon, 34 indictments, someone who's not good for America. But he also won before, when polls weren't as far down for our candidate. That speaks to how bad America is right now. And that's another reason we need to be out there voting, to protect all of our freedoms and to protect our democracy.
All right.
Would you agree, if I made one more?
Real quick.
You'd agree that Black America and Black voters just aren't excited about Biden-Harris in 2022 or 2024. They're just not. How do you fix that?
Well, I'm not going to say that they're not that excited. Black America's not. The Congressional Black Caucus represents 120 million Americans. And we are excited about having Biden-Harris because you have to look at the alternative. And if we quit saying what we're not and deal with what we're going to get, if we don't get up off of ourselves and get out there and create the synergy and the energy, because this is the ticket we have. And I like your question. Tell me, if not them, who? And all the names we've heard, the polls say that they come out lower than Biden.
All right, you win that one.
I've never, Congresswoman, I have never seen an election won in the middle of July.
There you go. Right. Last words.
I've never seen it. Congresswoman Beatty, we appreciate it. Keep up the fight. Trust me, y'all are catching hell. Semaphore dropped this story saying Jeffrey Katzenberg met privately with Biden in Las Vegas, saying the donors' patience is wearing thin, that they're holding their checks. They may stop giving money to the campaign, to the PACs as well. Well, guess what? The donors may have, the big donors may have money, but each of them only got one vote.
One vote.
That's it. Congresswoman, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Time to get paid, blow up like.
Fan-base exclusive audio rooms are here. Now tap, talk, and get paid. Monetize your live podcast and most engaging conversations. You can now create exclusive audio chat rooms only for your subscribers and biggest fans. And as a user, subscribe, listen, and talk to your favorite creators. Now tap, talk, and get paid. Because everyone's a fan of something, and everyone has a fan base.
I'm blowing up like you thought out, and if you don't know,